you hear about the little boy with Jesus in the garden, bro? And like, oh my God. The problem is that's not what the texts are saying. You're going to pretend your book is not built off the mythologies of these older civilizations. You live in a bubble. After the resurrection, Jesus appears to them on the mountain in Galilee, which, by the way, at the end of Mark, it's not there. There's no post-mortem appearances. It's shocking. It's scandalous. The church is still hurting from it today. The same God's name that we find in the Bible is in these tablets. They just want to pretend that those are false demonic versions. They're older than your Bible. So baptism is an entrance into the cult, a mystery, I would say, that they're joining in union with death. So there's a sense in which when you baptize, you're dying. The reason Paul was beheaded wasn't because he wouldn't recant his faith. Paul was decapitated because he was telling women to stop having sex with their husbands. So now they just go, oh yeah, well, the Son is God. And so why is the Son praying to God? Well, he's praying to himself, to his Father, really, because it's not him, but it is him. Gospel of John. Jesus turns water into wine. We've all heard about this. Well, guess who's been doing that for centuries? Dionysus. The original Genesis, the serpent wasn't the bad guy. The serpent was actually telling the truth. God lied. My name's Derek Lambert. I'm a son of a Green Beret, 7th Group Special Forces, medic, Halo instructor, close quarter combat trainer. Dad was one of those Billy badasses, okay, growing up. Very alpha male, bit narcissistic, but you kind of need that when you're carrying a gun on the front lines, facing darkness, as you might call it. My mom was she was the real fighter. She was the real warrior at home and raised us. And so I grew up in an alcoholic family.
Both parents?
My mother was sober, though the years of addiction with my father kind of rubs off and makes the loved one sick as well. It just happens. It's part of the trauma. It's like an abusive relationship. Over a while, they become part of that. And so me and my brother Kurt Lambert, who, by the way, would love your show, we grew up with a dad who is the greatest father in the world, but he's a werewolf. And when the moon comes out, there's a different dad. The moon is the alcohol. And so he would love us unconditionally. And this was my hero. I wrote my senior project on my hero. My father had tabs from his shoulders, all of that, like military emblems and all that, just saying, this is my dad. And he's a true fighter. He's a true hero. But he was also sometimes the biggest enemy in my life. And he loved me until he'd be drunk and words would convey other things. And what a damn life. What a journey. And I think many people in the world experience this kind of trauma. My brother's had a lot of run-ins with my dad as well. And he's larger than life. But where do we go from here other than Mom wanted to make sure me and my brother were taken care of. We went to private schools growing up. And I remember it was a Christian one. And there was this sermon, I'll never forget this.
Catholic family, Christian family, Catholic
Christian.
family? Okay.
Good question, because Dad was Catholic, right? He only showed up to church for 2 weddings in 20 years. I mean, he was one of those guys, you know. He's like, I'm walking in, hallelujah, peace. Mom was Holy Ghost Pentecostal in Florida, right here in the neck of woods. We're at snake handlers, okay? We're talking wild. I mean, I literally do it for fun on my own show, where I'll sit there and just be like joking around someone's super chats, and I was like, you are blessed right now, you know, and I'm just having fun. I'm at a sermon in my school, and this hit me. It hit me deep. The teacher was talking about, if you've told a lie, you have to lie about that lie. And they described it like there's a bank of bad things that we build up. They're already giving me an illness, okay? They're prescribing me with, here is your infection. Here is your disease, right? It's sin.
Mm-hmm. Original sin, right?
Original sin, but you also are participating in this if you've told a lie. And of course, we're kids. I've told a lie. Who hasn't? Then it turned into, but there's a heavenly Father who loves you unconditionally. He will never let you down. That's how much he loves you. And man, that message for me,
He'll judge the shit out of you, though, right?
he will. He's a good judge, right? He loves you so much, but he'll throw you in hell. The famous stand-up comedian who's like, I love you. I'll burn you and torture you.
Right.
That wasn't the message that day, right?
Okay.
They got to sell you the car. I mean, if you tell them about the bad engine and you tell them about how it's going to break down in 2 years, it's the lovey-dovey stuff. And it worked for me because with my father, there were moments I doubted, am I loved? I knew I was loved, but I wasn't. And there's the confusion of that trauma. It's hard to reconcile. And
are your parents still alive?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. Both of them are still alive.
Still together?
Still together.
Cool.
Which is shocking because most people at this time, but they fight to keep it. And
does your dad still drink?
Dad is not drinking anymore.
Good.
I know, right?
Yeah, that's great, man.
I know. So I feel like there's two Dereks in this world because there's two sides. There's the werewolf and there's the light of the day. And it's like there was a struggle in my mind, compartmentalizing how to live, how to live my life. And I walked down there and accepted Jesus into my heart that day, and I felt the biggest placebo effect in the world. It was real. It was an experience that I, to this day, can tap into and remember. That's how profound it was. But I would look back and go, okay, there's a bit of working up to like the music and the people and the message and all that. That was a placebo effect that really helped me feel comfort when I was having those hard times when Dad would drink or whatever, because my Father in heaven will never let me down. Years of devout, I'll call it fundamentalist Christianity, evangelical fundamentalist Christianity, going to church, singing, dancing, speaking in tongues. That's another thing we might as well mention. This particular Christianity I was involved in was a non-denominational evangelical type that said you don't have the Holy Ghost, which means you aren't saved, unless you speak in tongues. So how do you prove you have the Spirit, Matt?
You speak in tongues?
I mean, I'm making this up as I speak, right? Well, I'm sitting there as an 11 or 12-year-old, and they're going, you need to speak in tongues. And they're all around me. There's like 4 or 5. And I'm sitting here going, like, I believe, like I'm sincere. So I'm like, it's just going to happen, right? Like it's supposed to just happen. And no, I'm realizing, dude, they are not going to stop. And it's like this almost hypnosis type of, dude, let me just start.
It scared the shit out of you, right?
I was a little freaked out, and I'm like, finally, I'm like, and they go, yes, yes. So they start to like reward you psychologically. They're like, yes, yes, you have it. And I'm like, and then, dude, I start believing this. I start believing that I'm really communicating in the language of angels, because in Paul's letters, he talks about this being the language of angels.
Right.
And I am like, man, I'm building up that faith. I mean, bro, it's like, it's weird to outsiders. My wife was freaked out by it, but it became normalized within the movement. Foreshadowing the future, where I find out that I think the gifts actually ceased in the 1st century, but that's a whole nother discussion.
Okay. So how long did this last? How long were you in this
cult?
Yes, cult. That's a good word. I was at a loss for words for a second there, but yeah, cult.
I think I went to that church for the first 5 to 7 years of my Christian life as a young kid. I moved to Puerto Rico for 3 years. Dad was stationed down there, which was a great experience. Got to see a different world. When we came back, I went right back to doing church stuff, really committed. No girlfriends, had my heart broken, lost my virginity in Puerto Rico. She cheated on me.
Okay.
Lost my mind, right?
Yep.
Came back, no girls. I am done with girls. Bible in public school, I'm in like 10th, 11th grade, reading my Bible. The only kid in school who's like just obsessed. I'm like totally obsessed.
So you've got a personality that's kind of extreme, would you say?
Very.
Yeah.
Running triathlons.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't to brag. It's just part of like my dad kind of and my mom being extreme as they were. So like, we also genetically, I would say we're gifted, man. We were blessed with good genes. And so when I did soccer, I'm like the best first or second guy on the team. When it's basketball, till I got older and everyone's taller, you can't compete.
Right.
It's difficult to compete. But I was like best on my teams, right? In all these sports, football, basketball, baseball, soccer, and running triathlons. But then also when it came to drugs, When I
You
got
had to be
into
the best
drugs,
at that. Yeah.
I became
Yeah.
very good at drugs.
Yep. I had to be the best drinker for a long time, and it didn't work out too well. I finally quit. Yeah. Yep.
What do you do?
I feel you. I'm also a bit of an extreme personality, or have been in the past. So
Right.
yeah. So yeah, I feel you.
It sucks when you can't control. This is the total transparency. Like, there have been times in my past I can't control how I am. It's like, it's an obsessive compulsive kind of thing. And I don't know how to not be that way. And I've gotten way better. Like, since sobriety, since we're going to get to that place, I actually can control at least mostly my life. And it's a scary place when you're so self-destructive and you don't know how to control your own behavior, where you're going to die from your own actions. That's kind of jumping the gun here, but Jesus was very integral to my life and studying the Bible. And what happened in my mind, because I'm obsessive, is I want to know. It's like you know, with the clothing company, you need to know the fabrics. You want to know the nuts and bolts of everything there is to do with it. So when I had that profound experience, and then I met another Christian who goes, "Well, you speak in tongues? Tongues isn't real." And I'm like, "You're a Christian and you say tongues isn't real?"
So for you then, what was this like? So was it in high school that you got into some of like the alcohol and the drug kind of stuff, or what was high school like?
Yeah, I would say it was really middle school when I took a few double shots of tequila and vodka and drank beer in Puerto Rico and felt that warmth. I felt the same experience I had when I went down to the altar and asked Jesus into my heart. A comfort, like a complete euphoric comfort. Everything's going to be okay. Even had a dream one time that the final end of the world and a fire came down from heaven, and like literally it was the end, because I already believed the end was coming soon as a Christian. And when I died, or my eyes went black, and then there was Jesus, and he was writing in a big book, and he was like, "Derek, everything's going to be okay." And I felt warm. Well, I felt that same warmth with tequila, later heroin. Okay.
Physically, later heroin. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I legitimately was like, okay, hold on. Jesus feels like heroin, dude. I'm being honest. And it went from sniffing it to eventually injecting it. So you asked about when did I start? I'm at a bonfire. I put Jesus on the side sometimes to go date, or, you know, I'm a boy. I'm going through my hormones. I'm into girls. So I'm at bonfires and I'm popular. Even though I'm the weird religious popular kid, it's kind of funny how that works, and I juggled. But I'm drinking beer, and one night everyone goes, "Let's go smoke." I'd never smoked in my life. Even my younger brother had smoked before me. And I just go and I hit it. Weed, yeah. And I finally just, first time ever, and I'm like, and they're all crying. They know me, and they're like crying, "I can't believe you did it. We never thought you would. We didn't want you to do it. My dad always told me, smoking's for effing losers, son. Don't ever become a loser." And then he'd pick up his vodka. I mean, let's keep it real, right?
Right.
Like, one drug's okay, but
Right.
fuck that other one.
Yeah.
And I was taught that.
Much more trauma caused by alcohol than
true.
weed, by the way. I mean, significantly more.
My advice would be smoke and don't drink if you have to do one or the other.
If you have to choose one, yeah, I'd probably agree with
For
that.
sure.
Yeah.
So I'm like howling at the moon. I remember I've never felt this way in my entire life. Then we're jumping ahead. I meet this beautiful blonde-headed girl, and she just so happens to be my wife today. And we dabble with a little bit of other stuff, ecstasy and shrooms. Okay, so I got to experience ecstasy, real MDMA. Sometimes they cut it with other stuff along the way, and I had just tried things that I never would have tried.
Yep.
And then eventually I had a headache. We're skipping a little here, but I'm already now dating my wife, skipping school a lot to see her, and failed that semester. I was doing so bad, I failed, went to the principal. They said, back out, come back next semester. We'll blank out this semester and you can be successful next semester. Well, that worked out. I got her pregnant. And so now I have a kid on the way. I don't know where my life, I don't even know what life is at this point in my life. I still don't know, by the way, if anyone's ever wondering what life is.
Nobody does.
No one has a clue.
Yeah.
And I did good the next semester, but around this time I had a headache, and I'm at my future wife's house. My mother-in-law, she's addicted to opiates. And I had this terrible headache and I needed to Tylenol. She's like, here, just take this, a Percocet 5. I was off to the races. That euphoria I felt was, if not more powerful than Jesus. Like I felt, wow. And it wasn't like I just went and got addicted that day. I knew that was what it could do. And eventually I did. I got hooked. So it was starting off with Vicodins and Percocets and any oxys. This is before they changed the formula where you can't crush them and sniff them.
Okay.
So we're getting down into like drug language here and like actual street stuff that people do.
Yep.
Then they make the formula to where you can't crush the oxycodones or Oxycontin, really. I found oxymorphone. For those who may have been addicts or know an addict, Opanas, as they call them. You swallow them, you don't feel anything. You crush them and sniff them, you will potentially overdose. It's that powerful. Years of me trying to get clean, Jesus, finally going to Christian college. I'm literally trying to become a minister. I'm thinking that's my calling because I'm at church one day and a pastor at one of these Calvary Chapel churches. By the way, I left that Holy Ghost kind of church, exploring other denominations. And he misquotes one of the passages in the Gospel of John where Jesus says, tear down this temple and I will rebuild it in 3 days. And the Jews say amongst themselves, it took us 46 years. That's the technically accurate date. Well, this pastor said 40. Now I know it's pedantic, but here I am so OCD about the Bible and understanding the truth. I'm going, this pastor didn't even know the correct number of years. Maybe I'm meant to teach. How do I know more than like off the top of my head? You know, that's how I thought at the time. I went to college, had my wisdom teeth pulled. They prescribed me Percocet. Back to the races. Boom, get clean. Go to Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous. Get 2 years clean. Boom, start drinking alcohol. Boom, get addicted to alcohol because I don't want to do opiates. Now I'm abusing it. Me and my wife are having terrible marriage right now. I'm like getting into legal trouble. I relapse. I end up back on heroin, really, because the pills were too expensive. And one day this guy convinced me, just do a little heroin, it'll be okay. I'm like literally flying through my story here just to point this out so we can get into the juicy mythology and stuff. And that is, I did a little too. I was terrified. This will kill you, we're told. Did a small little, and it made me not sick anymore. Because when you're in opiate addiction, half the day you feel like you're going to die because you're sick looking for the drug. And half the day you're looking for that high. And you're stuck in that vicious, the dragon chasing its tail lifestyle. You don't know how to get out. And I know the nightmare. If there is a hell, that's it. That's hell. You don't know what to do. You're stuck. So how did I get clean?
At what point did you realize that religion was another addiction?
After I deconverted and was able to gradually land the airplane the last time I got clean. So I got clean in 2015, so practically 10 years ago. And I was a believer then. I needed it. I was like, if you're out there, whatever you are, I don't know your name, I don't know what it is, I need your help. All I knew was Jesus. And I had to act differently, even though it hurt. The way that you deal with addiction is you can't think your way into new acting. You have to act your way into new thinking because your brain is wired through the behavior and patterns. And I ended up titling a YouTube channel that I started, which is small. It's just a personal journey, Rewired Addiction, because you just want to rewire it and get addicted to something positive. And if you can't get rid of those behaviors of addictive OCD, you need to apply them to things that aren't going to harm you, period. It's that simple. And as I was deconverting and I was checking out Eastern philosophies and other mythologies, which were jumping the gun on how I transitioned to that, but it was at that point that I realized, like, I've been fooled. And it's not like they intentionally were fooling me. They're also stuck and duped into the same ideology. But I realized I kept bouncing back between Jesus, the gym, and testosterone and jacking up, and drugs, like alcohol, opiates, whatever it was. And I'd bounce between these substances in an abusive manner. And I noticed that the obsessive behavior with Christianity was not good. I would worry about, am I loved? Am I really saved? Why is it that the spirit that I claim to have somehow I end up back in addiction on drugs. Like, where's the power of the Holy Ghost here? How come I can't stay just normal like all these other Christians who are looking at me like I'm demon possessed, or I'm just a sinner who doesn't want to do good? And I found in the literature that I'm actually an addict, or I have a disease. Once I realized that there was something else wrong with me, it was more medical and not spiritual in that sense. That really helped me have freedom, realizing, Derek, you're not an evil person. And I think I could then evaluate Christianity as I was leaving it, checking out how comparative mythology led me to realize, why do I think this one's true when there's all these others that look and act similar, not necessarily identical, but very similar. And I realized, oh my gosh, I'm in a really abusive relationship. I'm trapped. I need to be free. I should not have any dogma tell me what I should, what I shouldn't, how I should live, what I should think. And I went on this freedom path of truth seeking, which led to the invention of MythVision. And that's when MythVision started, around that time.
So you've got 2 highly successful podcasts right now. I mean, you've got the one where which talks about your like essentially exiting this addiction, these patterns that you have. And I know it's the smaller of the 2. And then you've got MythVision, which you just mentioned, which is fascinating and phenomenal, and you dive into all these incredible topics, and you dive deep, and you've got great guests on, and you guys, it's a really cool podcast for anybody who wants to check it out. But what did you start with? How did you kind of start putting content out there?
Yeah, I started with the recovery channel. Okay. It's smaller. It's 30-something thousand subscribers. I haven't dropped videos very periodically at this point. Once you
because you're clean.
Yeah, once you get kind of,
and congratulations.
Thank you, bro. Thank you. Appreciate that.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's not easy, It's
right,
it's
as
tough.
I know. Yeah.
You know all about it.
Yeah.
And
I mean, for me, it was alcohol, basically. And I didn't really get into much else, but dabbled in weed a little bit, like twice in my life. So. I mean, I would say that wasn't really an issue for me. But the alcohol for 25 years, people don't think of alcohol as a drug, but alcohol is a drug. Like it's a serious drug.
It's
and
legit.
It's the one that causes the most trauma throughout the world, but certainly in American families today. I mean, and people don't realize it, that the way that you can live consciously with your kids and your family, and the way that you can raise your kids without alcohol, it just creates a completely different life experience for the children than it does with alcohol in the house. So
100%. And alcohol was worse than when I smoked weed. I tried to go back. When I was trapped in opiates, or trapped when I was drinking, it was so toxic in my life. I wanted to go back to just being the pothead who listened to, hip hop music, hot box in the car. And I couldn't. Something had fundamentally changed for me. Maybe it was the fact that I had no tolerance. And this is a funny story. Me and my wife, we tried to go back to that because I didn't want to die. It was toxic and it was destroying me. And we were smoking over near a Walmart about a mile and a half from where we lived. And it was a $20 dub. And it's hydroponic, we called it at the time. Now they call it loud and all these other names. And I'm smoking it. She's smoking it. And she's good after like 2 puffs. And I'm like, hitting the whole thing, and finishing it. I'm like, we're not wasting it. And all right, I'm high. I could tell. Let's start driving home. So I'm driving, and all of a sudden I look over at my wife and I see me in the passenger seat looking at me driving. And I'm like, oh shit, honey, something's wrong. And she's like, what's wrong? You're scaring me. And we're high as a kite. I'm hallucinating. And I'm driving, and I'm in the seat she's in, but I'm driving. Don't know how to make sense of this. I'm home having hot baths, trying to sweat to get it gone because I'm so paranoid, so hallucinating. And I was like, the panic and anxiety that came with it, I just couldn't get back into it. I wanted to. It used to work. Now, hell no. I can't touch it, bro. And so I'm like, what do I do? I can't go, Jesus, I can't do this. I can't, obviously, heroin, alcohol. I mean, I can't even smoke to chill out. And so I'm on this journey, and I'm not comfortable with my skin. And then, as I told you last night, I go through the religious stuff, I get to this peak of the mountain, so to speak, and I'm just tired. And then there's a mirror, and I see myself. And it's like you're finally meeting God, so to speak, and there I am in the mirror, and it's like, it's okay. You don't have to have all the answers. It's okay. Love yourself. Stop. Calm down, take a breath, because one day you're not going to be here. And it was like I saw kind of like divine and God, if you will, in me in a way, if we're going to interpret it that way. It was like I found myself and I was okay. And for some reason, from then on out, I've been very able to control my behaviors. I have no urge or passion for drugs or alcohol. That's the furthest thing from my mind now. Now it's my children and my wife. Like, how can I make more money to help provide for them? How can I be a better, parent, husband, whatever? I do try to perfect myself, but I know I'm never going to be perfect.
That's cool, man. Yeah, that's really cool.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you, bro.
Yeah, it's a huge awakening, huge realization. I mean, you rewired your brain essentially just by through a recognition of seeing God within yourself. It sounds like, right?
That was it.
Yeah,
that was it.
Yeah.
It was me.
Yeah,
it's like the famous footprints in the sand. You've seen the analogy where there's two footprints on the beach, and it says, like Jesus. It says, when you couldn't carry yourself, I carried you. That's why you saw the two footprints in the sand, right? They try to use that analogy. And I realized, no. The reason that there's two footprints in the sand is because it was me walking. Now, if I was carried by anyone, it was my parents, it was my wife, it was my children, it was the doctors, it was the people in my life. And without them, that wouldn't happen. So it's like that. Ironically, someone's husband had brain cancer and they get a tumor removed. The doctor who spent 20 years to learn how to do this. And then the loved one comes in and just goes, thank you, God. Thank you, Jesus. And you're like, I get it because I've been there. But it's like the guy right next to you.
Right.
That's the one you want to thank.
Right.
He's the one who really did it. And we need more like him or her. You see what I'm saying? Like,
I do. Yeah, it makes me think about funerals and how essentially funerals are hijacked by the church. Every funeral is if it's they're hijacked. And it becomes about Jesus and it becomes about God as opposed to that individual and their experience in life and the impact that they made on people and the things that they did and the accomplishments and that person living on through the people that remain. It switches from all of that and it becomes sadness and it becomes like just this story about how Jesus is going to save. It's an outward look for redemption as opposed to an inward look for redemption. And when you're standing there in front of that mirror and you had this transformation, that's probably the first time that you really and truly looked inward as opposed to looking outward for salvation. What's the next substance that's going to help me feel this feeling? What's the next belief that's going to help me feel this feeling? And you finally realized, it sounds like, that it's within. All of that is within yourself.
I heard a really cool parable, so to speak, when I was getting clean the last time. This changed it for me. It helped me to leave Christianity. And what the parable was, in light of all this, there's many others, I started looking at other mythologies, meaning I was never told by Christianity, hey, look at Hercules. Hey, check out Inanna. Why don't you check out Gilgamesh? Why don't you check out these other Egyptian deities? Why don't you consider these other stories? Hell no. Those are demonic. Those are evil. You're going to go to hell, blah, blah, blah. Well, in this parable, this one hit a little different because it used the language I was used to, but it had a deeper meaning. So God goes to create the world, and specifically mankind. And as he's thinking, it's a story. It's not written anywhere. It's one that I heard. As he's thinking loud, Satan, the devil, can hear. And he hears God saying, man will be intelligent, brilliant, driven, motivated, caring, passionate, all these adjectives that are the greatest kind of aspects, just like me. And Satan goes, I need to hide God from man. Where can I put him? I'm going to put God underneath the mountains of the earth. Man will never look into the mountains and find him. And he thinks about it. Intelligent, driven, motivated, inspired. Man will find a way to unearth the rock, remove the dirt. He'll find God. I can't hide him there. I got it. I'll hide God underneath the oceans, beneath the sands of the sea. That's what I'll do. So he thinks about that, and then he realizes, motivated, driven, intelligent, passionate. Man is a smart creature. He will create an apparatus that will allow him to descend beneath the water, sweep away the sand, and discover God. I can't hide God there. Where can I hide God? And it dawned on him. I will hide God inside of every man. They will always spend their entire lives journeying, seeking, looking, and searching, and never stop and just look inside. And dude, when I got goosebumps right now, because when I heard that, it was okay. You have all you need and the people around you. It's okay. It's sufficient. Why are you searching and seeking and struggling to find the thing that you had all along? And that, I think, is the key. And for me, man, the freedom that came from that was overwhelming.
Yep. Same. Yeah. Well said. I knew where you were going with that when you started it. And yeah, it's so cool. Yeah. Excellent. Awesome parable. So what was it about your life experiences and this realization that you had, I'll call it an awakening, that made you want to start this YouTube channel that you've now got, that's now growing super fast and super successful, and that made you want to get this started, and what is the message? Second part of the question is, what is the main message that you guys are kind of exploring or talking about on the channel?
Big question. So, do you watch YouTube?
Yeah.
Is there any shows that you think are just in a niche there's not enough of?
Yes.
Can you think of one off the top of your head? It's just like really, really cool. You wish there was more of that kind of stuff.
Yes.
That's what my channel was all about. I found people who were comparing the Bible to other stories, but I didn't find enough of this. And I was on a journey of just trying to figure out more about this book that I thought was the way, the truth, the only, and by the way, only part of the book in my interpretation of that part of the book, because it's the Newer Testament, not the Old. I loved the Old and its stories, but I wanted to hear more of people who are actually taking the Bible and saying, hey, this Bible is not unique. Now, that's a complicated term. Let me define what I mean. It is unique. So is the Rig Vedas. So is the Gilgamesh epic. But what I mean is it is not the on a pedestal book and everything else needs to be poo-pooed. We need to look at all humanity. And Christianity does a damn good job of creating an insulated tribalism that doesn't let us look at others like ourselves. We think we're better. We think we're chosen. Oh, we're humble about it. We're the humble chosen. Okay, trust me, I know I was one of the judgmental assholes who would try to convert you. Okay, I was trying to, I was lost in my own way, but I know. And once I saw that this book has the fingerprints of man, like all the others, if we're using the analogy that these other stories didn't happen, then why does this one happen? This one couldn't have happened. If those didn't happen, there's no way I would assume that it's like reading a Batman comic book to make some type of analogy. It's a little less comic-y book because they try to use what's called verisimilitude, make it look realistic. So the setting for Dionysus is in the real world. It's at a real place, taking place in history, so to speak, but it's myth. But imagine reading Batman, let's suppose it's the earliest, might be Superman, but one of these are early. Then you read Batman, you're like, oh, we're dealing with fiction. And then someone comes along and goes, now Spider-Man, you better get your shit straight because he's sending you to hell if you don't believe in him, okay? I mean, it's practically like that. Mm-hmm. Now you might go, but hold on, Jesus is historical. We got to get into that too, okay? Because I think there might have been a guy But even if there was, what about the other historical people who had myths about them crafted right after they died, some while they're still alive, like the Caesars? So we're jumping the gun here, but I needed to know more, man. I needed to see this. So I started off the channel where I realized that these other stories and other myths were just as profound and important. They're just part of a different culture. So if Christianity didn't win out in the West and it was Mithraism or Sol Invictus or some other religion, we would have isolated that as the supreme story, probably made it our most cherished one, and ignored the rest. If Hinduism took over the world, we'd be looking at that. If it was whatever, Islam, it'd be unfortunate if an Abrahamic faith came to be in charge other than Christianity, because it would be in the same pickle. Ours is the best and right, and those are evil. Whereas polytheism and these different ones were kind of allowing all flowers to bloom, which was a better program. The problem is you can't get all your constituency under the same umbrella. Because if everyone has different views, different beliefs, I go to this God, I like that one, I like this, I practice this. It's easier politically and socially to put everyone under one idea,
because
one
you
God.
can control them. And that is exactly what the early church did. This is not some woo-woo conspiracy. This is factual. The heresiologists of the early church condemned even the other Christianities because they had different, much more sympathetic views to the pagan cults. I'm using pagan. I don't mean it as a pejorative for those who might be watching who are pagans. I mean this as in like those that were polytheistic systems, other gods. There were Christian groups who literally went to the cults of Attis to see Christ. The Naasene Gnostic groups. They went to other cults and they would tell their members, go to the cult of Attis, the mysteries of Attis. You'll see Jesus, Christ, the Christ in them. Let's start at the very beginning.
Where do you want to go?
Of religion, like we're talking about pagan, we're talking about Old Testament, but where does it really, how does it begin?
Prehistory. Yeah. I don't think anyone really knows exactly how it begins, but religion and politics went hand in hand in the ancient world. So what I mean is civilization. Kings were ordained by the gods, given order. Their goal was to subdue chaos, which is why all these ancient myths have origin chaos myths, where you have disorder or chaos, and then there's order. Take, for example, the Marduk myth. King Marduk comes in. By the way, it's a later myth from an earlier Anzu bird myth. And I may get the names of the particular deities off the top of my head not precise, but I think it's Ninurta or Ninhursag or one of these deities in the earlier Anzu myth. And the Anzu myth, there's a bird that the god is going to do something like shower or take a break, and the Anzu bird's supposed to watch the tablets of destiny. It can control reality. And while he's gone, the Anzu bird's like, I'm keeping the shit for me. So he starts to do that, and the god's trying to come back to get the tablets of destiny, but the Anzu bird is wreaking chaos and is not going to let him. And every effort they do is in vain, because every time they try to do something in the story, he could just morph reality to change it back to what it was, and he can't get the tablets back. So how do we get it? The gods are terrified. So they come together, and one of the wise ones, I think it's Enki or Ea, tells them, listen, what you need to do is you need to get an arrow, put a feather on it because the Anzu bird is made of feathers. So when you shoot the arrow and the Anzu bird says, go back to your thicket where thou comest from, or whatever the English translation might be, that feather is going to continue. It's not going to be removed. It's going to go to the bird because he's made of feathers. And sure enough, the arrow does, and it kills the Anzu bird, and they get the tablets of destiny. Later on, the story of Marduk is rewriting that earlier Babylonian myth, and Marduk becomes the supreme god. But before he does, it is Tiamat, a sea saltwater deity who he has to face. And you get this in Genesis 1, except it doesn't want to name Tiamat. It calls it the Tehom in Hebrew. And so it's chaos, it's disorder. So how does Marduk do it this time? In the earlier myth, they're terrified. They don't know how to do it. They have to deceive the bird in order to win. In this myth, Marduk is so powerful that he ends up approaching Tiamat. But before all this happens, all the gods are terrified. That's Marduk. That's Marduk on the right, and that is Tiamat on the left right there that you see. It's a beautiful, that's a penciled in kind of inscription, but that is on walls, like inscribed. You see the vivid artistic rendition. And I think those are thunderbolts in his hands. And later on, we see thunderbolts in another god's hands. And that god's name is Zeus. But not only Zeus, you have Thor, right? You have other deities that are these kind of storm deities. Baal, the one that Yahweh is constantly fighting against, storm deity. Yahweh is seen and depicted as a storm deity as well. But Tiamat, this sea dragon, is also the equivalent of a god-type creature named Lotan. Leviathan from the Bible. So anyone who's ever read the book of Job and the suffering servant Job, you read this story later with a fire-breathing dragon who can't be penetrated, and Yahweh says, I play with Leviathan like a bird. And there's actually an artistic rendition of Leviathan in the sea, and there's Yahweh, the God, in the clouds, facing or kind of fighting that chaos, and it's usually depicted with water. So the water is the chaos. And so Marduk ends up telling the other gods, who are terrified, they don't even want to approach Tiamat. Tiamat's too fierce. Marduk says, that's it right there. That's the one. I love that. A beautiful depiction, again, of another God versus chaos and bringing order. So how does he do it? Marduk comes, as gangster as he is, he approaches the dragon, and all it takes is him approaching it. He's so powerful. He doesn't have to play deceit. And that older model, you could tell they're trying. They make gods into better Supermans now. He just walks up. Now, some depict that he speaks. Some say that the arrow does go down into the throat of Tiamat. But in some, he just approaches and speaks, and Tiamat is shredded in half, and he takes her carcass, and he builds the blue firmament of the sky from the body. And you can actually go to Egypt. In fact, this might be worth bringing up. In Egypt, they have like a depiction of the firmament on the walls. You'll see the stars in the body of that goddess creature. It's usually feminine. And it is this like, it's the heavens. It's what humans depicted as the blue sky, because it was ancient flat earth cosmology. So there's a disk. The earth is round-ish. Christians love to reinterpret this. Check that out, bro. That's actually a drawing depiction of a real wall inscription in Egypt. So you can go and you could go see this on the walls. And notice how anthropomorphic they make it, yet it is mythology. And see the boat on the left? I wonder where that boat comes from, where these boats come from. There's another Egyptian myth where there's 8 people, 8 survivors on the flood. This guy's name was Noah. But in Egypt, there's a boat. And if we could pull that image up, that'd be great. A boat with 8 characters on it, and they're gods of some sort. So in the older stories, gods could even die. And there's a flood, and the gods are on a boat. I think it's Nut, N-U-T or N-U-N. I cannot remember the exact terminology, but it's 8 characters on a boat, and it's a flood. Here we are. We're already, like, what I'm trying to say about mythology here is one did not need to borrow directly from another. That's the straw man that the Christian apologists want to make. Oh, well, causation does not equal, correlation doesn't equal causation. I've engaged these guys for a long time. And you know what? I finally backed off of the whole I need to directly connect everything. Sometimes you just can't. You can't know. But you're going to pretend your book is not built off the mythologies of these older civilizations. You live in a bubble. You're Bubble Boy. And if you've ever watched the movie Bubble Boy, his mom lies to him and tells him that if you ever leave this bubble, you will die. And one day it pops. And when it pops, life is good. And he realizes he's been deceived all along. It's Plato's cave.
It's the Truman Show, right?
It's the Truman Show. It's Plato's cave. It's Bubble Boy. And
it's just not doing, it's not stepping outside of the belief system to do the research to understand where the stories come from. And your point is that all of these stories are built on older stories. And so when I ask the question, where did it all begin? It's hard to tell. It's hard to really know how long these oral traditions and writings have been going on and rewritten and rethought of for the time. And your point is, I guess, that it's very highly correlated with control and with politics and with controlling a group of people. And it's just a rewriting or oftentimes a new version of something that's old. And
it always is.
Yeah.
It's not even that it probably is. It absolutely is.
Yeah.
And the unfortunate part is we've been duped. We've been duped into one story, one book that allows a kosher version of ours.
And it's always mythology, I guess, when you're looking at the older versions, but when we're on the current version, it's not mythology, right?
Right.
It's the truth. Ours
happened, bro. Ours happened. You better pull your head out. You're right. This is a good observation, and it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate because what happened to me when I realized, whoa, the beauty that you can actually see of these other stories found all across the world. This stuff goes into prehistory. This stuff goes into, I can't even tell you where it began. Humans, the best way to depict this, notice I showed the natural phenomena of the stars that were built into this feminine goddess that helped hold up the sky, and the boats that are riding on the water, because the sky's blue. We have to think like ancients for a moment, and this is what's beautiful. It's kind of common sense to them. They see water on the earth. Water's blue a lot of times. They see the sky's blue. That means it's water. Now, we today are able to check and go, well, technically, no, but there is a sense in which water in vapor is in the sky, but why is it blue? And so they thought there was water and there was a solid dome that was solid. Above that, the boat is riding on that water in the heavens, and the thrones of gods are up above that water. This is cosmology for the Bible, the Old Testament. This is cosmology for the ancient Near East, pretty much all over. You get this in the Greek mythology. It's all over the place. What is it? So mythology are stories that are culturally derivative, and they have their own little spins often. Even today, scholars argue, what is mythology? They don't even know. Some don't agree on the definitions. But to me, it's a sacred story that doesn't have any literal historical necessity to it, but it has profound, deep origin and cultural significance to why are we here? Why does evil exist? Why do women have pain when they're pregnant? Why is it that we have to kill ourselves laboring to get crops? This is in Genesis. The serpent, why does it slither on its belly? Well, remember that point back here where he tricks the woman? Yeah. Why do women have pain when they're birth? Okay, here's why. We messed up back here. These are called etiological mythologies that go way back. And what the ancients did is they observed natural phenomena, the thunderstorm, the volcano, earthquake. They saw gases coming out of the earth. They had underworld ideas that came up. And by the way, in colder regions, hell is cold. In hotter regions, guess what it is? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It is a reflection of the natural world around them, and they're making sense of it. And they were damn good at it. And the stories today are still circulating. That's how powerful these myths are.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to believe as a child, I guess, if it's instilled into you from your parents or someone that you trust, literally with your life, with your survival, that people are telling you these stories and these myths, you're going to believe it. You're going to mistake it for reality. A belief is not reality. A belief is not truth. A belief is truth. A belief is a belief,
Exactly.
Faith is faith. A belief is a belief. Truth is truth. Fact is fact. But belief is not fact. And so, but that's the mistake. That's the error that people make. And when they're kids, typically, if some adult authority figure that you trust for your survival is telling you this stuff, you're gonna buy into it, and you're not gonna let it go, until you're told that it's not true. Santa Claus, okay. We let go of that one. The Easter Bunny, we let go of that one as we get older, but we keep giving that stuff to our kids. We keep giving it to the next generation and keep, just keep the myth alive, I guess, is what's happening.
Joseph Campbell, famous mythologist, wrote a book, A Hero with 1,000 Faces. And the very opening paragraph is a quote from Sigmund Freud. And Sigmund Freud talked about how we deceive our children, and he's explaining he literally deals with trying to explain how behaviors are and why people act the way they are. I think he's a psychologist of some sort, but this guy's brilliant. Older. We're going back a little bit, mid 20th century when he's important. In that quote, he says that children who behave out of order, they've been deceived. When they were younger, they were told a lie. And he uses the example of where did babies come from? And we would tell kids, well, a crane flies and brings your baby brother. Now we know, he says, what that crane means. It's sexual, it's natural reproduction. We don't tell our kid, well, daddy made love to mommy last night, and now you got a brother coming. They're not prepared for that in our mind. Well, then they find out where really babies come from. And the Sigmund Freud thought that deceiving children by telling them not the true nature of things creates a distrust of adults and creates a distrust of authority. And so inevitably down the road, you get a society that ends up being, we've been deceived.
Well, why do we have the right to create reality for somebody else? We create reality for ourselves through our beliefs. And that's something that I think that a lot of people don't realize is that every individual, and there's 8 billion individuals plus on this planet, and every one of them is creating their own reality through their collective beliefs. But what right do we have to force a reality onto a child, onto an innocent child? And it's like the difference between not knowing and knowing. No one is comfortable with just leaving that as I don't know. Filling that gap between where I am today on some mystery, name the mystery, whatever it is, it doesn't even matter what the mystery is. I'm here, I don't know. What we do is to get to knowing, we fill the gap between not knowing and knowing with beliefs. That's what we do. And we create our own reality and we say, I know, and it gives us this sense of comfort and it gives us this sense of control of our environment, that we're in control. We know exactly what's going on. We take things to 100% to 0%. I know this is right. I know that, I know how this works. But to force that onto a child is really, it's really abuse in a way, to create that reality for that child that's forced to rely upon you for their own survival. To create a false reality for a child, for me, is it's a form of abuse.
I agree. I think, especially if the reality you're forming is harmful, like if we're all collectively wrong about something that isn't causing a direct issue, so to speak, like, oh, you're telling a kid who's 5 years old he might go to hell, that's bull.
Yeah.
But if you're telling, like,
because you're trying to control the kid.
Yeah, you're trying to control the kid.
Control their behavior, right?
But you're also maybe even, let's just say you're also just delusional yourself and convinced of this fictive myth that you've ingested,
right?
Which also still doesn't make it not abuse.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm getting at is like, imagine all society's wrong about a particular natural phenomena today, and we're kind of trying to fill in the gaps of explaining it, and it's not hurting anyone. And we're all human. We're going to make mistakes. Like, we're learning as we go right now, right? Scientists are discovering, hey, we should stop eating that thing. You know why? This is what's happening. And that would just be an ignorance, based on ignorance. But when we know better, the Apostle Paul himself said, when I was a child, I spoke as a child. I thought as a child. I acted as a child. But when I became an adult, I put away childish things. He didn't really. If you read his letters, like some of it maybe, but like he's still saying some pretty childish things to me. But using that analogy, it's like we should know better and try to do the best we can for our children. I agree.
Yeah. It's being okay with not knowing.
Yeah.
And not creating some belief to fill in the gap. It's just being okay with saying, I don't know.
Exactly.
And explaining things to kids that are truthful and honest and being open with their questions and being transparent with your response. You don't have to control things. You can empower the child by just listening and not judging them and being, an open-minded individual that can have like a conversation, and the kid's going to connect with you. The kid's going to respect with you. But what we do is we try to instill fear into people so that we can control them, and we reward them or we punish them with this system based on how they respond to the, it's insane what we're doing today. It's insane. Where we're at right now is we got a long way to go to evolve to the next level.
For sure. I agree.
So, and it's a mental, spiritual evolution. It's not a physical evolution. We're perfectly well evolved physically. We just need to evolve emotion from an emotional intelligence standpoint.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Totally agree with you. Yeah, brother.
So what? So like, let's get into maybe one or two of those things that are like the the stories that have been taken from a past, from an older source that we're continuing today, and that we don't realize that something today is connected, in some belief system is connected to some old belief system. I know there's millions, but maybe like for me, I guess one that I'm not totally clear on that I'm interested in is the whole Dionysus and Jesus kind of comparison, and how elements of Dionysus were taken and brought into the image of Jesus that everyone has today.
Should we start back with the scholarship about Yahweh in Dionysus and then work into Jesus for you?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That was a shocker for me over the last year.
Okay.
I've heard in the past that academics would compare. So let's break this down for the viewer. Who is Dionysus, right? There are variations of this deity in different regions. He's called Bacchus or Iacchus. He is called Zagreus. There are many other names, actually, that he goes by. But Dionysus is the god that we always think of liberation, of freedom, of wine. He's the god that you see with statues that has grapes, clusters of grapes. He's the party god to the Romans, but he's much, much more than just wine. He is a god. Yeah, this is a beautiful one right here. Theoi. That website has a lot of interesting images, but that god, for those who don't know about Dionysus, we have inscriptions all the way back into Linear A and Linear B. Now, we haven't been able to translate the Linear A language way back here in the Bronze Age. Linear B, we've done a little deciphering. We still don't know that language through and through, but in Linear B, we see the name Dionysus, and he is associated with wine. But also Apollo goes way back there too. So, okay, what's up with Dionysus? Dionysus is associated with wine even way back in like 13th century BCE. Well, there's a scholar named Nisam Amzalog that I found who actually goes, he's very scientific about this, but he says, listen, there are mine shafts, so to speak, where they're mining copper, tin, gold, all throughout the Levant, Northwest Arabia. There's some down in Egypt, all the way into the Aegean. And there's a really famous one right there in the peninsula near where you would say the Exodus of Moses took place. Now, if you take the myth of Exodus of Moses, it's myth. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't have geography. It doesn't mean they're talking about Egypt, right? That's a real place. But notice it's mythology. It's placed in a historical setting. They go out of Egypt. I'm not going to tell the whole story, but you notice that Moses discovers when he runs after killing one of the slave masters in Egypt, he runs to this place out here in the wilderness and discovers this god named Yahweh on a mountain. And what's shocking about it is when the story is told in Exodus, in the Bible, he approaches the burning bush and he goes, "Your fathers did not know me by the name Yahweh. They knew me by El Shaddai. But I am revealing to you my name as Yahweh." Well, that's BS. I'll tell you why that's BS, because if you go back to Genesis, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, his ancestors, the God's name is Yahweh in the story. So maybe there was an earlier story where these stories were floating around where it was El Shaddai depicted with them, which meant it's a different God. It's not even the same God. So notice Marduk takes over that older version of myth and becomes the king of the gods. Yahweh takes over the place of El. El was a different god from the north, up here in the region of the north, and he has a traced lineage all the way into ancient Sumer, like ancient Babylon. That's how old that god does, but he's in Canaan. So you have the northern region near Phoenicia and Canaan. El is like the dude, the head honcho, king of the gods. His wife is Asherah or Athirat. There's different names describing her. He has 70 sons. There's funny stories about this god, by the way. This is the same name of the god that we see in the Bible. So Yahweh and El kind of fuse in the Bible, but they are two distinct deities before. One of the stories has El walking on a seashore, and there's two goddesses approaching. They're just like really hot young girls. I'm not making this up. The story says he whips his schlong out and starts to work it, and it reaches to the heavens, and the two girls are impressed. Now, you know guys wrote this story for sure, okay? I'm dead serious. Guys had to have wrote this myth because there's no female who's going to go, yeah, I'm so impressed the way you stroke that. So they both go home with him that day. Mind you, he has a wife at home, Atharoth, who's the mother of 70 sons, and the main son she cherishes is Beall. He's like a big dude, important deity in that world. Well, he impregnates these two goddesses. The next time Atharoth approaches him, this is how you could see our own modern kind of social structure in the ancients. You could tell she ain't happy in the story. She's not having it. And so, but she has to pretend because he's king. And she can't just, like today, you know, women have a lot more freedoms and that's a good thing. Well,
this is legit in the Old Testament?
This is not in the Old Testament. This is in a Canaanite myth that is on tablets of stone that's older than the Old Testament. But the same God's name that we find in the Bible is in these tablets. They just want to pretend that those are false demonic versions. They're older than your Bible. So Johnny came first over here. Like, you came later. You're accepting the propaganda of these redactors and these scribes who've told you what to think about Asherah. By the way, they demonize her in the Bible. She was the wife of God. In the Canaanite region, she was the wife of God, the consort. He had many wives that he collected, obviously, but she was like his chief, main queen of heaven, she's described. She approaches him, and she's trying to win favor for her son. So she makes him happy. She sexually satisfies him, and then he gifts Beall because that's her main kid she wants to give. It shows a reflection of modern day, like how a woman might do whatever it is to satisfy a man who has power or money or whatever to provide for her children. Now, what's this got to do with Dionysus? Okay, Dionysus, in the earliest myths of the Greek stories we have from Homer, like these are written. There's older myths. We just don't have them. There's nothing written. We don't have the evidence. I wish we did.
And why don't we have it? Was it lost and was it burned? Was it never found? Was it?
I would imagine we've lost it due to non-preservation. Probably wasn't copied. Could have been destroyed. There's many ways that this stuff could have been lost. But I can tell you this, if you're jumping ahead to some of the fire burning of books and stuff, you do get that in the Christian era. They are burning books of magic. They are burning books of heretics and stories. Some Christians are preserving
too.
Oh, for sure.
Mean, I would have been burned, man. I am on fire back in the day, no doubt.
I love that shirt, man. Yeah. That's a beautiful shirt.
It means non-believer. I practice non-belief. I practice non-judgment. So I practice non-resistance. You know, so I practice understanding where I have conditioning. You know, those are kind of my daily practices. So I want to say that I don't judge religion as bad or religion as wrong. You know, I do practice non-judgment. I just attempt to realize that these are beliefs that we're talking about, and beliefs exist within individual minds of people, and they're created by the human mind, and they're sustained by the human mind. And so it's very important. One of my daily practices is non-belief and to challenge everything. That doesn't make me an atheist. To me, atheism is a belief system. It's a belief that there is no God. So whether we take something to 100% Jesus is real or 0% Jesus is not real and there is no God, I'm not either one. Try to keep an open mind, try to stay in between on that spectrum, but non-belief is something that I think is uber critical for humanity to attempt to adopt in order to get to the next stage of our evolution.
I agree. There's humility in not knowing or not being certain about things you can't be certain about.
We can't progress if we all think we know the answer already. A lot of it, man, I mean, if you really dive in and you do double click like you're doing with this religion thing, I mean, you find out that it's not as black and white. It's not as if we, like, science is like has everything completely figured out.
Right, of course.
I mean, it's built on top of, it's like, I don't want to call it a house of cards because it's not that fragile. There are a lot of things that we do know as fact, but when you take something that we're saying is 100% true because it's the best theory, when in reality it's 98% true, and you're building something else on top of that has a 96% chance of being true, and we're saying that that's fact because when it's actually theory, and you got something else built on top of that that's 90% chance of being true, you got to multiply the 90 times the 95 times the 98 to get the actual odds of that last thing, the most modern version of reality being truth. And when you multiply those numbers, you're down, every time you multiply, a 90 times a 98 times a 95, you're getting to a number that's like 60% chance of being true. And that's what we're saying is the truth. And that's why we're not advancing scientifically. That's why we're not advancing just because we're mistaking these theories for truth. We're mistaking beliefs for truth. We're mistaking these things for fact. And it's a way to keep us stuck. And open-mindedness is the cure to really all of that. And that's really non-belief. And so that's kind of why, why I have guests like that have alternative points of view on, guests like even Billy Carson, guests like people that have that are thinking about things completely different. And maybe maybe they're belief based as well with their thinking, but it's not any crazier than freaking, any of these other belief
Jesus
systems.
rose from the dead 3 days later.
Sure. Yeah. Right. So it's like, I think exploring the new things, the new alternatives, the theories that we haven't really heard about yet, the new ways of thinking, is just critical to keep everything in check and to really challenge and question what we think we know, in order to advance. And so,
well, that's why this whole bringing it back to Dionysus, this is, even the scholar who wrote this is like, look, it seems this, I'm persuaded, right? But again, everything that I might say pertaining to Dionysus is not certain, okay? But I am so persuaded about some of this stuff because it's like, there's no alternative explanation that makes the most sense to me.
Sure.
And let me give you an example. So we're talking about where Dionysus is from. According to the Greek stories, not anyone else saying where he's from, in one of the early hymns to Dionysus, he gets captured by pirates. These are the lestai, okay, that Ammon likes to talk about, okay?
Yeah.
And we'll get to that.
I'm not a pirate.
I'm not a pirate.
Yeah.
Well, these were real pirates, okay? Now, they weren't, they were looking for booty. Not that kind of booty, but booty, okay?
Right.
And they're on their way to, it says, toward the Levant. Like they're headed toward Israel, near the Dead Sea, because it said that that's where his parents are from. What? You're talking about the Aegean, way up here. Why are you heading down toward Egypt in the Levant area, somewhere in the desert, the Dead Sea? So he points out, like, what? The early Greek myths are already depicting him traveling down here. There's also in Homer, right, where he's talking about it, he brings this god named Hephaestus, who's a blacksmith. Now, we were talking about mining. One of the biggest places was down there in northwest Arabia, right there at the Aqaba, the Gulf, the little coast right there near the where the Sinai is, where Moses is said to have traveled and all of that and found God. Found the God of the Bible is in this area named Yahweh. Well, in Nisam Amzalog actually argues that the miners here that are traveling and transporting these elements, gold, copper, the tin that they're mining, they're traveling all the way to the Aegean with this product, whether it's by ship, whether it's by land. And when they get there, he thinks they bring with them their customs. Part of anyone who's moving, they bring their culture, they bring their gods, and that God, Yahweh, travels into the pantheon in the Greek world in the name of Dionysus. And later on in the Hellenistic period, lots of authors, for those who don't know, the Hellenistic period is Alexander the Great onward, practically right there to the turn of the century when Jesus shows up is the Hellenistic period, but Hellenism influenced from there onward. Like it goes
like 300 BC to basically zero?
Practically.
Something like that?
Yeah, a little before 300, but still in that area.
Okay.
The influence of Hellenism was so profound, it went into the DNA. It went into the fabric of humanity, period. They learned Greek. There was cross-cultural stuff on a level that was just not like before. The Alexandrian library, nothing has been built like that. Nothing. They had like automated doors, heated floors. Like they had stuff that like we today are the richest people in the world have, right? And anyway, Dionysus later is equated with Yahweh, the same derivative name of Yahweh, often by authors. And scholars today, again, we're talking about these scholars, right? I love scholars. I interview scholars, but I feel like they have so many kind of conceptions that they already have that I'm like, hold on. So you in 2025, these ancient authors who read and spoke this stuff in their native tongue, who watched the Jews in their temple practice, when they wrote and said, hey, these Jews, they're behaving and acting, they must be worshiping Dionysus in this temple, the Jewish temple, because they're doing this like the Dionysus worshipers, they're doing that like they say the same name as Dionysus, Yao, they're doing this, they're doing that. They themselves were identifying that Jews were practically doing Dionysus worship in the temple. And so the modern authors today, scholars just go, yeah. They just like to connect all these dots and stuff, and they're wrong. They're just trying to like harmonize cultures and stuff. And there might be some of that, but it's like they're in the know better than the ancients who really are thinking, actually, I think there's some more influence here. And we have some telling evidence. First, second, third Maccabees, these Greek pieces of literature, they were originally written in Greek, Ammon, in case Ammon's wondering, because he goes to the whole Hebrew Bible is all written in Greek first. That's a whole different thing. These were originally written in Greek. Scholars don't think these were written in Hebrew first and then translated. In them, it says that we're going further in history here, but Ptolemy, which is Alexander the Great's, one of his leaders, when he died, the kingdoms were divided into four. He was one of the main guys. He took over the region of Egypt. There were 1 million Jews in Egypt in the Hellenistic period around this time, roughly. They were coerced, according to the propaganda of Maccabees. Whether they were coerced or not, we really don't know. This is propagandistic literature. But it says that they were forced to worship Dionysus, to become citizens, to gain respect. But in reality, a lot of scholars go, they weren't forced. Like, they accepted it. It's like anyone who's joining the culture is like, we're cool. We'll just make it work. We're going to join it. It's the most popular stuff. And if you want to have high status in the culture, you want to do this. It's respect. Now, some may have been forced. We don't know for sure. The influence of Dionysus, that was their gods, onto the Jewish people of that time, 300 years before Jesus. It's in their own literature that they were already worshiping it. Whether it was by coercion or willingness, they're worshiping this God. They're learning about this God. I jumped from Yahweh all the way down here just to say, he thinks that there's a connection back here in the Bronze Age. Most scholars haven't even evaluated that evidence. And then when you get down in the Hellenistic period, it becomes a no-brainer. And I'm looking at the Hellenistic period and finding out that under Ptolemy, who ruled the whole Levant, where Israel is right now, if you go to the Scythopolis region, Nazareth, the Galilee, there are Dionysus after Dionysus, Apollo, there's Attis, there's all these gods on all these inscriptions everywhere. Go to Sepphoris, the neighboring town of Nazareth. There's a theater. There's a giant house on the top of the hill that has actual inscriptions of Dionysus. They have an actual zodiac sign with Greek and Hebrew here with Apollo in the middle. A Jewish synagogue with the 12 zodiac signs, and Apollo, the god Apollo, is sitting in the middle. Now, they might have harmonized and said Apollo, Yahweh. They were cool with it. They were fine with mishmashing deities here. And anyway, we get to the New Testament. That's when the shocker comes in, because you can't touch that book. Not allowed to do that with this book. And the Gospel of John,
the New Testament, there's 4 books out of an original 28. Is that right? Or were there like 4 that were included out of all of the Gospels, and they were chosen by the church? Am I here?
Yeah, there's 4 Gospels. Yeah. There's 27 New Testament books. Among the 27, there's 4 Gospels.
Okay.
And yes, the people who won out history, by the way, the canon, which is just measure the ruler, like where we are willing to go with these texts and not, they chose and defined those over the coming centuries. So it was not established in the 2nd century. It was not, these are our books and everything else is wrong. There were proto leaders that started to say these are our texts because they're already fighting against heretical groups that have different views. And there are different gospels. There's so many different gospels that are floating around that other Christians are looking to. There's other epistles. There's other books of Acts. There's all sorts of different stuff floating around in the 2nd century.
So do you feel like they had to take it from 27 to 4 because it was like there would just be too much confusion? There was too much contradiction. There was like, why did they say, you said the canon is who did it?
All canon means is these are the measure of the books that were they're like defining, these are our texts. These are our sacred texts.
Okay.
There are 27 New Testament books in your Bible today that they have chosen to put in there. Out of the 27 books, which are mostly letters, epistles, there are 4 gospels that were chosen. There were, outside of these 27 books, other books that never made it in.
That's what I was talking about.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and with some crazy stuff in them, right? Neil was in here, and we were talking about some of the stuff that was in some of those books. Like he mentioned that if there was one of the books specifically, if it were to make it in, then Christians would be defending a walking, talking cross.
Yeah. I can't remember exactly which gospel this is. I think it's in one of the gospels, the additional gospels.
Yeah.
Might be a gospel of, not gospel of Thomas, I know that, but not gospel of Mary. I think it's one of these other gospels. Oh, it is gospel Peter. Yep. Thank you for pulling that up. Yeah. The cross comes out of the tomb, and it's a talking giant cross. And you're like, what? But there's other stuff too. Like in the Gospel of Mary is a very interesting one because she's the chosen disciple. And Peter's not, and he's pissed. And he's going, well, how come he would never tell you things, Mary, and not tell us? And he goes, sorry, Peter, we were closer. And this is where a lot of people kind of conflate thinking that Mary was his wife because they kiss on the lips. But there's other texts where the guys that kiss on the lips, okay? It doesn't, like in our modern context, socially, we'd be like, huh? I went to, for example, Kuwait one time, and I'm like going to shake a hand, and they just come up and like peck you on both cheeks, and you're like, oh, okay, hey, bro, you know?
Right.
We're not used to that culturally. So people kind of anachronistically looked at our model and go, ooh, that means Jesus is into boys, or that means this, or whatever. But yeah. There's that. There's other acts. There's stories that, Christians say, well, they died for what they believed in. You wouldn't die if it wasn't true. First of all, you don't even know what really happened to these people. Some actually may not have even believed after he died. There's evidence in the New Testament of this. The Gospel of Matthew, chapter 28. After the resurrection, Jesus appears to them on the mountain in Galilee, which, by the way, at the end of Mark, it's not there. There's no post-mortem appearances. It's shocking. It's scandalous. The church is still hurting from it today. The apologists are still trying to fight me about this today because it's a problem. There's no appearance. Matthew, which is correcting Mark, adds a story. It says, hey, he's on this mountain. And it's based on stuff that Mark indicates. Oh, he'll go to Galilee where you'll meet him. But the women were afraid, and they told no one. That means they told no one. Not that, they went and told everyone. And they added a long addition to the Mark gospel that was not original. And it contradicts and it does all sorts of weird things. Like earlier in Mark 16, he says, and it was the first day of the week. With the added stuff that scholars are like, that was not originally there. It repeats it. Like the next few sentences, and it was the first day of the week. You don't write that way. I'm not going to go, hey, it was the first day of the week, Matt. And he was strolling down with his scooter, and on the first day of the week, Matt, he was also going, like whoa, and grammatically it doesn't make sense. All right, here we go. Then the 11 disciples went to Galilee to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. Remember, Mark says, the other gospel says, this is where he told them to go. When they saw him, who? Jesus. Resurrected, bro. I mean, think about this. They worshiped him. The dude's right there. But some doubted. How are you going to doubt? Some questions, just fundamental questions. The resurrected Jesus is right here. So some people question, what did they see? That would, like, if you saw the dude died, alive and resurrected here on a mountain.
What's there to doubt?
Yeah, what would you doubt?
Right.
And so some scholars are wondering, like, hey, maybe some of this is reflecting that early disciples, after he died, actually left the faith. Even the closest to him. And the question I have for Christians is this. Listen, I get it.
Was it even a faith that they were leaving at that point, right? I mean,
that's another problem, right? Because these are written decades later. And at the time, it might be a movement. If there were really disciples of a guy named Jesus who are roaming around Galilee and in Jerusalem, it could be a cultic movement for sure. But believing he rose from the dead, many scholars think that developed after he died and cognitive dissonance set up in the cult, and they now had to make an excuse or find a way to explain why he died. I like the idea too. This is just another one. Again, we're talking about uncertainty and just flexing ideas.
Yeah.
I like another one that's really interesting to me, Matt, is where Jesus is saying in these Gospels, he's going to die. If you pretend we just accept that as historical. We go, he said he was going to die. This is death by cop. This is suicide. He's telling them he's going to die. And each time like Peter comes and goes, no, Lord, you will not die. He goes, get behind me, Satan. Tells Peter, his own disciple, get behind me, Satan. You mind the things of man and not the things of God. So you're getting in my way. I'm wanting to die. He needed to die. Now today, if someone told you, hey man, I'm going to die, those cops are going to shoot me and I'm going to do it, you're going to look at them like, you crazy bastard. What's wrong with you? It works in this context because, well, for me, it's mythology, but if you grant that this dude really is going to die, he's not the only guy. He's not the only story where the people die and have post-mortem appearances, somewhat resurrections. So here you have these Gospels. You have them doubting. The doubting tradition continues and it picks up. It gets even worse. Doubting Thomas. We all know the story. Thomas won't believe. The other said, he's alive. He rose from the dead. And then Thomas is like, I won't believe unless I could touch him and feel and know. Sorry, that's kind of me. Like I kind of need that. But he appears. He appears to him and he touches and he's like, you are, Lord, you have rose. Beautiful picture of him doing it. And here's the scandal. I just left Elaine Pagels. She's like a famous Gnostic, wrote the book called the Gnostic Gospels. Me and my wife went to New Jersey, and she actually thinks the Gospel of Thomas is older than the Gospel of John. Many scholars, especially apologists, oh no, it's later, because they want to create that bubble boy. They want insulation. Theirs is holy. It's not like anything else. She says in the Gospel of John, 3 times, 3 different accounts in that gospel, it jabs at the guy Thomas in a almost awkward way. He gets singled out in a negative way. But when you go to the Gospel of Thomas, where there's these sayings and deep teachings that are hidden that the rest of the world doesn't know, they want to keep this for their secret initiates of the cult. In it, Thomas is seen as the twin of Jesus. It is the mirror on the hill that I was telling you about. Because then it says, when the rock is lifted, I am there. When you go here, I'm there. I'm you is the whole teaching. Christianity did not want that. The ones who won out history did not want that teaching. They wanted Jesus to be worshiped, not you are identical with Christ. And you get hints of this in John. Look, Father, may I be in them as you are in me, and we become one. Like, you get hints of it. Well, there's 3 times those episodes where he jabs at Thomas. And then the final scene when Jesus, after he rises from the dead, has all of them in the room and he breathes the Holy Spirit onto them. Guess who's not in the room? Thomas. She says John was written to attack the Gospel of Thomas. Now that tells you that Thomas would have been written earlier. Now, no one knows, right? But if that's the case, quit pretending these are the first 4 accurate Gospels and all those others are later and they made them up a century later. No, dude, they're competing. And these Gospels in our New Testaments are competing with each other as well. They contradict each other as well. They do not agree on so many things. So
what's like a big thing that they contradict and don't agree with each other?
What's a big thing? Let me think.
That people might not be aware of?
Yeah, so there's basic contradictions, but I would say some of the big ones would be the way they treat the disciples in the Gospel of Mark. They're complete nimwits. They are dummies.
They're day laborers, right? They're illiterate day laborers?
Well, not like that. Not necessarily saying they're uneducated. I'm saying they don't get it.
Oh,
the Gospel of Mark paints this narrative where, so the story opens, this is the Son of God. Jesus is the Son of God, right? Everyone who's reading the book knows. The actors in the myth, Peter and all of them, they don't get it. And every time Jesus does a miracle, he goes, oh, who is this? How could he do that? And then they just go back, and then another miracle happens. Oh my God, oh my God. And they don't get it. And then another, oh my God. And it keeps doing that. And they're dummies. They don't get it. And then even Peter at one point goes, Lord, I'll go to death for you. I will even go to death for you. And he's like, you're going to deny me thrice before the cock crows, Peter. You don't even realize it. And the irony is this. When Jesus goes to die, Peter, his own disciple, disowns him and denies him 3 times. And another guy named Simon Peter is his disciple. Another Simon carries his cross. There's another ironic story where 2 of the disciples approach Jesus and say, Lord, in the kingdom, can I sit at your right and he sit at your left? And Jesus is like, you don't get it, do you? At the end of the story, there's 2 people, one at his right, one at his left, on a cross, dying with him. The kingdom in Mark is suffering. It's death. It is not of this world. It is a deep and hard teaching. You need to be willing to die, a martyr. You have to take up your cross and follow me. That's the teaching. When Matthew writes his gospel, using 90-something% of Mark to do it, he oftentimes will make the disciples actually understand. And they get it. And they know, because they don't want the disciples to look bad. It is my speculation that the reason Mark makes them look bad is Mark is somehow dependent on Paul. This gets into some serious, real controversy. This is a real conspiracy to me. Because if you go to Paul's letters, Paul says, I confronted Peter to his face. I almost want to cuss because the way he talks, he is pissed. He's like, you treated the Gentiles differently. You did this, you did that, and I confronted him. And then he's complaining to the Galatians, how dare you? Who has bewitched you, O Galatians? And he says, anyone who teaches another gospel than the one that I teach you, let him be accursed, anathema. Let him be damned. And then he repeats it again. Again, I tell you, anyone who teaches another gospel than the one I teach, let them be damned forever. Okay. Then he confronts Peter in this story, and then he talks about James. These are the Jerusalem disciples of Jesus, according to the Gospel of Mark. They don't get it. So at the end of the story, the women told none of them, for they were afraid. Then the question becomes, Matt, who got the message? Who did receive the true gospel that he rose from the dead? And I would posit the Apostle Paul. And this is to shit on the 12 and to raise up the Apostle Paul's gospel and his message, which is being sent to the broader world, not just to Jews only. So I am doing a little bit of speculating here based on internal evidence, but I think that there was a total division. Maybe they were cool at first. Paul might have been working and helping out these guys. They had a break. They fractured into different groups, and they ended up dying in the Jerusalem War. The 12 gone. Paul's message became Christianity ultimately, which is why you don't see mostly Jews in it. It's the Gentile world. That was Paul's mission. So there's so many ways we can approach this, bro, and there's so much internal evidence. I don't know if I did a good job of showing a contradiction specifically between the Gospels here. One really that stands out to me, though, is in John's Gospel, Jesus at the beginning of his ministry cleanses the temple, meaning he went in, he flips over the money changers, he condemns them, he's whipping people, he's going, how dare you turn my father's house into a den of thieves? In Mark, Matthew, and Luke, which by the way are synoptic, they're seen together, that he does it at the end. And the reason that the Romans crucified Jesus, according to those Gospels, is because he is a disruptor. He went in and did this to the temple. In John, he does it way back here at the beginning of the ministry, not at the end. So the chronology doesn't even line up. There's too much off the top of my head to even get into all that. But in the book of Revelation, that famous apocalypse book, there might be jabs at Paul, where he talks about Jews who aren't really Jews and the synagogue of Satan in Ephesus, Asia Minor. And they tell people that they can eat meat sacrificed to idols. That's a pretty specific statement. Paul, in his own letter, says, you can eat meat sacrificed to idols. It's okay because idols are nothing. This guy doesn't think so, and he thinks that the B666, all of this stuff we can get into. I know who they are. I can explain really what the 666 is based on the gematria, the numerology and stuff. It's Caesar. It's the Roman Caesar. And Christians today pick up a receipt, $6.66,
Right. Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about that. That's fascinating, first off. Thank you for sharing. That's incredible knowledge. Gnosis, great Gnosis. I want to talk a little bit about that 666 thing. I want to talk about Satan, actually. I got some questions about who Satan actually was. I want to talk about Ammon because we've mentioned him a couple of times, and he goes on to every podcast and he starts it with "Hail Satan," and that's like so shocking to people. But it's like, who is Satan really? Like, does anybody really even know who he is? But let's come back to that. I want to take a quick break here. Let's get a bite to eat, and we'll come back and dive into some of those topics.
I'm down.
All right, cool. I feel like we should have recorded from the break room, the lunch room.
Right? No, I'll go wherever, and I'll bring that.
Yeah, cool. I mean, let's just dive right back into that since we're on the topic and of what we were just talking about, and that is the Ammon situation. And maybe let's get your thoughts. Where should we even start with that?
Goodness gracious. I've known Ammon for a little while. We've never been close like that, but friendly, Yep. He might feel I've betrayed him somehow. I don't know, maybe. And look, let me put it this way. I'm not trying to hurt this guy. I don't mean him any ill will. I think he's wrong, okay, about a lot of things. Now, he is an expert in Greek. So here's what we need to do, though. We need to back up a little bit. Neil was learning Greek from Ammon. Neil's my bro. That doesn't change. And I, for a long time, felt strange guy, okay? I won't get into all the details, but there's a lot. There's a lot there that made me go, not my cup of tea, okay? Entertaining, wish I had half the energy that he brings to a podcast. How's that feel, Jesus? I mean, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, he's just a really larger than life, charismatic character. What ends up happening is I'm also buddies with other people who know some things, and he has a following that in a trollish manner creates the tension. Maybe Ammon had the tension there to begin with, don't know, but his audience would come to my chat, and these scholars that I talk to too were like, hold on, we're all most of us are guys, so it's like a dick measuring contest, you know what I mean? And so Ammon would make some pretty radical claims. When I look back after all this happened, I looked at the emails. The first email he ever sent me wanting to come on my show was to present about the little boy with Jesus in the garden. Okay. That is his main shtick. If you were to ask me, like, what's the thing Ammon is, that's what got him on Danny Jones, the 1 million views, the shocker. People were like, what? Even major comedians were echoing this. Like, huge, famous comedians were like, did you hear about the little boy with Jesus in the garden, bro? And like, oh my God. Like, everyone wants to hear that sensation. I get it. It sells. Okay. The problem is that's not what the texts are saying. And that's a bold claim. Now, you might go, well, Derek, prove to me in the Greek, right? This is what the Ammonites might do. And I'm like, look, I'm learning Greek as we speak, right?
Was it Old Testament or was it New Testament? It was New Testament. And whose gospel?
Which one? You talking about?
Who's when he was in the garden with the boy?
Oh, Mark.
Mark, yeah.
Mark's the only gospel that gives this story this way. There's a naked young boy, according to Ammon. Can I say what he says? Yeah. Okay, let's be very cautious here. Just saying, ladies and gentlemen, it's not my ideas. This is practically, in a nutshell, well, I'm trying to stillman him, okay? I don't want to do this and be facetious. I want to be honest. Ammon is saying that earliest Christianity is a mystery cult. By the way, I agree. I think that there's a mystery cult there. However, I think what he does is he conflates things. He finds a text over here that has a certain thing, and then he allows that to somehow interpret the other context of other things. If he did this more as like a hypothetical, he was like, look, I think there could be more tentative, more humble about it, because it's a radical view, then maybe there wouldn't be so much fluff, no noise, debate around this controversy. What he does is he says, this little boy, he says a little boy, the Dionysus, however you properly pronounce that in Greek. My friend Stephen Nelson would kill me right now if I'm not saying it right, because he's such a, get it right, D. He has shown, by the way, that there's hundreds of sources that show this is a man in his 20s, a young man. Ammon says little boy. He even got corrected by the OG Carl Ruck himself. It was like, it's a young man. Well, you're right. It could be, young teen. Like, he's still fudging it to try and make him little. Why, Ammon? Just stop the shtick, man. Just say it was a young man. Jesus was doing stuff with a young man, whatever, if you want to go that route. He says that the bandage, the particular Greek word there that is being used, which is a wrap, a garment, if you will, which everyone else would just say, yeah, this is just like a garment. Like if you were wearing nothing underneath and you just had a white garment on, it's the indication that he's naked under that. And so he thinks it's a bandage wrap, because his stuff was medical mainly. Ammond came from a Roman medical PhD background where he studied Galen and these other figures that are really big into the whole science and medical aspect of things. And he thinks that this is a wrap around the penis. I think of the young boy because it says that the boy was the naked one, I believe. And then he had he's trying to extract the semen from this young boy. Again, I keep emphasizing his interpretation of this, in order to alleviate a snake venom overdose that Jesus is high on, and he doesn't get it out in time. And the Roman soldiers catch him as this booty trafficker, and I mean booty in the more literal sense now, and he is arrested by the Romans for trafficking, for being a lestai.
A human trafficker.
Lestes. A what?
A human trafficker, essentially?
Yeah, a human trafficker.
Is what Ammon is saying.
He's saying he's a human trafficker, yeah, and then he has all these, he does this everywhere else too. He finds like other passages to try to say mini kids and stuff. And the Romans nail him to a cross, and Jesus, the reason he dies early is he overdosed. So he didn't get the semen that was supposed to cure the snake venom drug, and he dies on the cross early because he overdoses. He has a strange, really radical view, right? So what the typical standard view is this. If you just read the chapter before that, you kind of contextualize it. Here's Jesus in a messianic context. He's a Jew who is claiming to be a king, or at least his disciples are saying he is a Messiah. He's going to be a king. And he flips over money changer tables. He creates ruckus. He's got the Jews pissed off at him, constantly talking about what's coming. And Rome's not okay with people claiming to be kings. Only the client kings that Rome has put in place, like Herod and others. No one else is going to be king. They would not be okay with that according to that period. Like you can't be sitting here competing, acting like you're the king, Caesar's not. And you get that indication in other places in the gospel when they come to Jesus, they go, should we pay taxes? And he goes, hand me one of those coins. Whose image do you see on that coin? It's a Caesar. And on those coins, usually it talks about Caesar being a god, okay? So Jesus is like, well, if that's Caesar's, then give back to Caesar what's Caesar's, meaning give him his coins that have his images, but give to God what's God's. So Josephus talks about, at this time, many Jews were claiming to be messiahs, saviors of the Israelite people, the Jewish people. Jesus is fitting that bill. He gets in trouble not only with Jews in the narrative because they don't like him according to the story of Mark, but also the Romans are not okay with the fact that this guy's claiming to be a Messiah, a king, potentially, and he's causing trouble in the temple. He's literally leading people to a potential revolt. Rome's not okay with that. And if you read Josephus, there's several other Messiah Jewish figures who did the similar kinds of things, and Rome went and cut their heads off and killed them all and crucified many. So here's Jesus getting crucified. What makes more sense when he says, I am not a lestes? Why did you bring your weapons with you when Jesus says it in the garden to the Romans? Meaning, I am not a violent activist. I'm not here to fight, okay? And then they arrest him. That's what every scholar I've ever read on planet Earth pretty much says here. When you look in Mark, that naked young boy who flees, he wasn't naked initially. He becomes naked in the process of trying to flee. That's the struggle here. He becomes naked. He isn't naked when you enter the scene.
The wrap falls off as he flees.
Exactly.
Right.
And
and what is the wrap is kind of the question.
A garment.
Yeah, it's a garment.
But it is symbolic. I think you could take this literal, and a lot of people try to. And the funny thing is, Ammond's reading this like it's literal. Like he's acting like this is literally what it's depicting and what happened almost. I read Mark much more fictive, much more literary, and more imaginative, right? What does that garment represent? When you read the Apostle Paul's letters, he says, when you are baptized, you're baptized in the water, and you come up, you are putting on the garment of Christ. You are putting on immortality. You are putting on what is forgiving you of your trespasses and sins. So baptism is an entrance into the cult, a mystery, I would say, that they're joining in union with death. So there's a sense in which when you baptize, you're dying. I just did a 3-hour, 6-minute documentary on baptism alone, bro. Went into Orphism, Mithraism, Isis and Osiris, the mystery cults that we find with Apuleius. I mean, there's a lot here about mystery cults that I think the language Paul uses, mysterion. It is a mystery religion language, right?
And what is that definition of mystery cult or mystery religion like?
Usually they're experiential cults that believe they're getting immortality in some way through a particular eros gamos, like a sacred marriage to the divinity.
Okay.
So it gets into the weeds here, but the long story short is that there are several different movements that believe by participating, they're either going to reincarnate or gain immortality. Everyone dies. This goes back to Gilgamesh. He was seeking immortality and couldn't find it. So here, Paul describes baptism as a death, burial, and resurrecting with Christ. You're putting on immortality. He describes it as a garment. He describes it as you're putting on a garment. So here is this young boy, and the language that Dennis MacDonald, who, by the way, knows Greek like through and through, he's a classicist New Testament scholar. He went to Harvard for this in the 70s. He he has a skill in both areas, knows Homer, knows the Greek world, and knows the New Testament through and through. He points out that this naked young boy represents, in his view, the believer who runs away. He abandons Christ in a way. It's you and I. But later, this young boy is showing up in the tomb after the resurrection. So when the women come to the tomb and the tomb's open, there's a young man, a neoniskos, who is clothed in the same Greek term, same garment, and it's only used twice in Mark's gospel. In that scene that he wants to say pedophilia stuff's going on, and in the last scene, the very last scene when the women come to the tomb, there's a young man who's actually dressed in a white garment. He's wearing the same thing that the young man who fled from the Mark, like I told you earlier, the two men go, "We will be in your kingdom seated at your right and left," and later it reflects something different. Peter says, "I will never deny you," and then later reflects a different Simon Peter or a Simon figure who carries his cross. There's irony that reflects later in the story. And I think when you're looking at the garden here and the naked young boy who flees, here you have him being restored. He represents, in my view, I could be wrong, it could be something else, but it's not the wild narrative that he's depicting, because Christians mostly were ascetic in nature. They were aiming more toward fasting, avoiding sex. There's early legends of Paul. The reason Paul was beheaded wasn't because he wouldn't recant his faith. Oh, he rose from the dead, and the Romans don't like that I believe he rose from the dead. No. The stories have it that Paul was decapitated because he was telling women to stop having sex with their husbands, because sex is icky and sex is sinful. So the men, powerful Roman men, said, "Who the hell is this man telling my woman that she shouldn't sleep with me and that she's committing a sin?" And they get him arrested and he gets his head cut off. Now, do Christians believe this? I mean, you see what I'm saying? But notice it's not a bunch of orgies. There are mystery cults where there's orgies. Ammon wants to find the mystery cults that have orgies and apply all that sexual lingo and that sexual innuendo over here into Christianity. And the funny thing is, historically, many of these mystery cults that had those sexual things in the past, they became asceticized over time because the philosophies changed. So if you read the myths of Zeus or Hercules or many of these heroes, they actually have stories where they rape. They literally take women against their will and make them pregnant. Later in philosophy, Plato says gods can't have passions. Gods can't lie. Gods can't cheat. Gods can't do that with mortal women. That's not a god. So clearly the stories don't mean what you think they mean, and then they made them metaphors. So later, when you have people like the cynics that come in, who, by the way, Heracles was their number one guy. Why? All he had was the lion's mane and his club, and he lived off nothing else but that, and he wandered the world as a savior of the world. What happened to the stories of him having sex with women and doing crazy stuff and all those fiascos? they have reinterpreted them. So it's a problem. In my view, he just has, he's looking at things in the most perverted possible way. And it's like, look, I don't believe this shit at all. Like, I am the first guy you go to on YouTube, probably can find a video that he debunks this stuff. And I'm sitting here going, I don't see anything of what you're describing here in Mark 14. I don't see anything that you're describing here in this text. It blows my mind. And that's just that one example.
Do you think he's as much of an expert in ancient Greek as he says that he is?
This is the struggle for me.
Yeah.
Neil from Gnostic Informant and Stephen Nelson, who knows both of them know more Greek than me. And Stephen knows way more than me and Neil, right? Stephen Nelson and I did a 5-hour video where we were critiquing Ammon. And in the process, Stephen had the conclusion at the time that Ammon is incompetent. So if you look at our goofy thumbnail of him wearing his little like Catholic cap, calling him dunce, and he flunked Greek. That's because if you really do take what he's saying and you look at LSJ, you go and fact check the material, you have to question, does this guy really know what he's talking about? Because he clearly does not. If you actually go and look at this stuff, it seems like he doesn't. Stephen and Neil, I think, have a different interpretation now of Ammon. And they think he's doing this on purpose. They think he's not incompetent. And Stephen knows enough when he's watching Ammon, because he's watched so many of his episodes, where he's like, I catch him make some really actually intelligent observations about the Greek at times where it seems like he does know what he's doing. And then Neil's like, dude, I'm telling you, bro, I think he knows what he's doing, but I think he's bullshitting people.
So it's like he's kind of created this story, and so now he has to just keep it up and keep going with it. And
you and me, bro, I think you and me agree. Like, I can't read his mind.
Yeah, right. It almost doesn't matter, but either way, you're thinking that this is
this is where I always go. Here. I go to Joseph Smith because it's a close historical example. Joseph Smith, by the way, if people don't know this, there was real martyrdom situations that happened. Many Mormons died, and they were persecuted by people in the state. They were annoying to the people in the state, but they were attacked and killed. And I can't remember the exact state before they ended up in Nauvoo. They were actually martyred by many people around them. Okay, if you ask a real Mormon apologist who believes Joseph Smith, he really believed this stuff. And even Mormon people who know the Mormon history of Joseph Smith, they go back to his cult startings and they're like, dude, this guy believes some stuff. But then if you ask the ones that are an apologist, hey, was he making up stuff? And they're going to go, yeah, golden plates, angel Moroni, all of this stuff. Like, he's making stuff up too, but he believes it. So Ammon is a mystic kind of guy. He seems like a mystic. Part of me thinks he believes the shit he's making up. And then the other part of me wonders if he's just, I don't know it's hard for me to put my finger on it. But the biggest problem I would say that he does with words like Christing is...
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, what's the biggest problem first?
Everything's a drug.
Yeah, right.
If your mom tomorrow Christed something, she's a drug. If you call her a Christ, she's a drug. And the word Christ itself, which, by the way, I look forward, I hope you get Stephen Nelson out here. He knows the languages, and Ammon won't bring his name up on his show.
Yeah, you mentioned that, hopefully it's okay to mention this, but that Danny Jones wanted Ammon to debate this guy, Stephen Jones.
Yeah, me and Stephen, three-way Danny, we're on the phone for 30 minutes. And we were telling Danny, bro, you got to have Stephen come on, man, because there is so much material that Ammon is just making up in front of your audience that you want the facts. Now, Stephen and I were like, look, see if you can't get Ammon, set it up. Let's get a debate. You and Ammon debate on Danny Jones. I wish I could be there to referee because I imagine Ammon will not let him talk. He'll talk over him. I imagine he'll use tactics. He'll do anything he can to face the reality of what Stephen's got. Stephen has his cards. Stephen has him. And he knows it. I think Ammon knows it. Ammon won't mention his name. He'll bring me, he'll bring Kip, he'll bring other people's names up in his shows. He won't mention Stephen. He avoids name dropping Stephen. It's like he doesn't want people to know who this guy is.
Because he doesn't want to give him any publicity, because he doesn't want him to be challenged to debate him. I mean, probably...
I can't read his mind again, right? But I think that there is that let me try not to give this guy any attention because I think he knows how to fact check
He
me
knows,
and really.
yeah,
and,
gotcha.
and listen, Neil and Ammon have spoken and brought the data to Carl Ruck. The guy that Ammon on Danny Jones' podcast says, dude, Carl Ruck can back up my interpretation. Carl does not agree with his interpretation. That's a lie. That's fact check. We know it's a lie. So they spoke to Carl Ruck, literally email and phone, and then Stephen met him in person since all of this. It wasn't long ago. And Carl Ruck's like 99 years old. I mean, he's old, right?
He's like 86, I think.
Yeah, I'm just
something
saying,
like that.
you
Yeah,
know.
he's up there.
I remember the stand-up comedian, one of the guys is like, hey, he's 97 years old. And then the next time he mentions how old he is, he's 98. And then he's like 99. So, but Carl Ruck's like, no, he's wrong about this. And you guys are right. So why is he dodging the bullet? He conflates things. He finds a text. It's kind of what Christians do with the Bible. They find a word, a thing, and then they go, Bible interprets Bible. Bible interprets Bible, baby. So now I could jump over here and this word means this over here. Now, sometimes it can, but oftentimes it is different. It's just a word that's being used. But Christing is just to apply or to anoint.
And he's saying, and I just looked it up, Carl Ruck's 90, right, as of right
Okay.
now. But so yeah, so you're
Sorry, Carl.
you're saying that that Christing means to anoint something, and it does not have to do with drugs specifically. It's just anything that's being anointed with anything. And Ammon is saying that any time that they use the word Christing in ancient Greek, they're talking about drugs.
He over capitalizes on that. Yeah. And he again, Christ, we Christ all the time. We Christ stuff all the time. I put hair gel in, I'm Christing. If I'm putting some ointment on or lotion, I'm Christing. If I'm also going to Christ with drugs, I can do that as well. So there is context. I'm sure you can find this anomalous text where there might be a some type of drug that is hallucinogenic or going to change your altered state of reality, and you're Christing it in some way. Oh, I'm sure you can find that. There's something out there. What he does is he finds that, and then he makes everything else become that thing. And he has the drug interpretation with it. And I've even watched Danny Jones when he interviews him, and he's like, let me guess, drugs? And he's like, you're absolutely right. And it's like, you can almost predict now what he's going to say because he has that drive. The sad part is, unfortunately, I haven't gotten to that level of Greek myself to be able to take you through. But if you get Steven Nelson in here, and if you are watching, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to want to watch that. He will rock the world of all of this and show you the ancient Greek and go through it. And he can break down what this stuff means, what's going on in these texts. And he'll go into the scandalous stuff with you. Like Ammon wants to make everything scandalous, and because it's sensational, it's fun. I even heard him say Abraham was a trafficker. You know, he's trafficking, human trafficking and stuff. And I'm like, when does it stop? Who's not a trafficker at this point, according to Ammon?
Was
you know
Abraham even real?
No, he's a mythical dude.
Yeah. So we don't have to dive into that one, but okay. So I mean, that's kind of the story there. And I invited him onto this podcast and he declined. He didn't want to come down here. And his excuse was basically, it doesn't really matter, but he's comfortable going on to Danny's podcast, it sounds like, and he's comfortable doing his own podcast where there's no one to kind of, question the things that he's saying. I'd love to have him on. I actually am super entertained by the guy. I think he's super interesting. He's very unique. I've gotten so many requests to have him on, but unfortunately he's declined my invitation to come on. But so he's just kind of doing the Danny Jones thing, and he's doing his own thing. He did say that he would debate Christians on Danny Jones, and he had that one priest that he brought on, which is like, he's just like a sitting duck. That guy, of course,
guy.
yeah, right. Anybody like that, Ammon is going to just dominate. But if you get somebody that's like a Stephen, then it would probably. But ultimately, at the end of the day, he turned down that debate.
Yes.
After the conversation that you guys had on the phone with Danny.
Danny, bro, I promise. You want a guy who's really going to G-check Ammon? Steven's your dude. And Steven's on the phone going, I'm telling you, I've got it. I've got his number. And then Danny's like, send me what you got, and he was like, I don't want to send all of it. I don't want to give all my eggs, because Danny might give him his stuff to try and prepare or make up something, to react to. Like, he almost wants to get Ammon, right? Well, he approached Ammon, and then word came back that Ammon declined.
Okay.
So Ammon wouldn't debate. A lot of times, by the way, he'll reject shows because of monetary reasons, or he acts like he's above monetization. And that's unfortunate, because we all have to live, even including Ammon. And I wish he would change his little, I almost want to call it his rule that he has created about making money, because Neil, who was a diehard Ammon student learning Greek, told me that his inner circle do pay him. And they give him $100 to teach Greek. I can't remember how often. So he is getting paid there, but he'll demonetize his channel. And notice something. He's talking about the most sexual things, the non-ascetic things in the world, but then it claims asceticism when it comes to monetary value, but then wants to talk about pedophile stuff, sex, drugs, all this crazy stuff. But where's your compass here, bro? Like, if you're going to be consistent, then go completely ascetic. Don't pretend that monetary makes you dirty, but then you're talking about the dirtiest possible things, and that somehow doesn't. Like, there's a weird compass that he seems to have here. Get your compass right. You want to be consistent? Hey, wear a white robe with nothing underneath it, okay? Like, how far do you want to go in terms of this? I just think it's unfortunate that he does that. And then Danny Jones, for example, has it behind a paywall, his interview, for a week or two, making money from his episode with Ammon. How hypocritical, Ammon. Like, dude, you choose to go on a platform that's going, and guess what? I love that Danny's doing that. Like, more power to Danny. Grow, bro. Like, right. I want him to do that. But Ammon needs to self-reflect here and stop playing the high and mighty, I'm better than you because I don't monetize. No viewers hurt by the fact that they hit a skip button 4 seconds later, and you can pay to take care of your family, Ammon.
Right. Yeah. No, it seems, totally. Well, good. Yeah. I mean, anything else on him before we kind of move on? I mean,
look, I don't wish him any ill.
No.
I really don't. And I think he's one of the most charismatic guys. I just wish that more people knew to take him with a grain of salt and not act like he has it and everyone else is wrong. It just be more balanced. If you enjoy the entertainment, cool, but understand factually there are people out there that are calling his bluff on the data. And if you're like, I don't care about the data, I like that he spanks Jesus on his kitchen floor. Dude.
It's entertaining, man. He is entertaining as hell. I'm going to give
That's
him
all
that.
I have, though.
I enjoy watching him. On Danny's, Danny's a good friend too, and I enjoy watching him on there when he goes on. But it really just is him against the world, right? I mean, he's obviously created some followers as of late, and some people are kind of trying to pick up and piggyback upon his ideas or the narrative that he's kind of created. But did this exist before Ammon? And is there anyone else that's out there that's actually talking like Christing his drugs and Jesus was a pedophile and all this stuff that he's pushing?
The material that he's discussing, there's been forms of it that have already been kind of floating out there. Like, everyone knows there's some legit, like Lotus Flower, there's some legit psychedelic stuff. Carl Ruck himself has already been publishing.
Yeah. Psychedelics for sure. Yeah.
Apples of Apollo, the book by Carl Ruck. There's a lot to be said about coded language of drugs in the ancient world where people are finding gods.
Right.
And I say plural because oftentimes polytheistic settings, but even finding God. They found cannabis on an altar in a Jewish setting, where ancient Jewish setting that they found cannabis residue, meaning remember what happened to me when I smoked my blunt on the way home? They're hallucinating. They're seeing God like I was seeing myself and my wife.
Right.
Oh, here we are. Archaeologists identified traces of burnt cannabis in ancient Jewish shrine. And you can see the standing stone right there. That standing stone, I've seen that. Me and Ryan, we've gone to Israel. That's actually in the museum. And the standing stones represent the deity. On the right, there's another standing stone. And usually that's God and his wife they represent. But those are called masabah. They're standing stones. Anyway, they had cannabis residue. Like, the drug thing has been a really hype thing for a long time. The other thing is this. Most people don't know the idea of Jesus with a little boy or with a boy is not original to Ammon. There is Morton Smith wrote a book, Jesus the Magician. He wrote about where Jesus fits. There's this book called the PGM. It's the ancient magical papyri that we've discovered. And a lot of the elements about Jesus overlaps is very similar to ancient magicians, sorcerers, people who are into magical incantations, and probably were in the vein of some of these people who might have been taking drugs and stuff. There was a lot of this stuff in the ancient world. Morton Smith had this, he had discovered in a library a 1600 something, it was like a copied text that supposedly goes back to one of the early church fathers of a secret gospel of Mark. And in that secret gospel of Mark, there's an initiation night scene with Jesus and naked young man or naked young boy. And a lot of scholars have questioned whether or not Morton Smith made it up, because he was so smart of a scholar that they thought he's so sophisticated he could potentially have made this up. Now, come to find out, he himself was homosexual. So some of the scholars have thought, isn't it a coinkydink that he's here in Israel, finds in a library this homoerotic looking scene between Jesus and a young boy. Here we are. So there's reading this right here, the young man, relationship with the young man, perhaps even sexual, right? So you can actually go and read Morton Smith's book, but a lot of scholars are curious. They're really wondering, is this legit? Like, did he discover a forgery that was a 1600s forgery? Does this really go back to an early church father? So that homoerotic stuff in Mark, with the secret gospel of Mark, which was a different book, has made some ponder, hey, and Ammond knows. He already knew Morton Smith's position. He builds upon it. That's why his position is even more radical and different. Yeah. He knows Morton Smith's work, but then there are scholars who went to the Gospel of John that describe the beloved disciple. I don't know if you've ever heard of that in the Gospel of John, but there was a character, he's never named. He's like a secret, he has this name, the beloved. Jesus kisses him on the lips. He lays on Jesus' chest, reclines at the dinner table. Like, there's so much there. And even at the resurrection scene, when they say he is risen, Peter goes to run. Peter's the main guy in most of the traditions. Notice their mythic archetypes. They want to compete. Mary's competing against Peter. Peter's competing against Paul. And then guess who wins the race to the tomb? The beloved. So they make the beloved in this story like almost like Jesus' lover. And some, very few, have interpreted that Jesus had a lover. Now you might go, why the hell would he have a lover? You have to kind of step back into the past a little and understand that Jesus is a philosopher-like. Philosophers had boy lovers, young men that they were in love with, and it was common. Pederasty was a common thing in the ancient world. So this scholar interprets the beloved disciple as potentially an erotic, but much more, deeper emotional relationship between Jesus and some random young man who was his disciple.
And it's written by Greeks. And this was a very common thing for the ancient Greeks. Yeah.
And the Gospel of John looks like a non-Jew wrote it. A lot of people think that a non-Jew wrote this gospel.
Got it.
Meaning interesting. A Greek or a Roman or something. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Shift gears for a second here, and as long as we're talking about people maybe for a second, okay. Billy Carson was a guest that I had on my show, and he's coming back in a couple of weeks. I really enjoyed my time with Billy. I mean, he came across to me as a very intelligent, very open-minded on one hand, but on the other hand, he has some very strong beliefs about some things, and I think just exploring his beliefs was one of the more interesting things, that I've done on the show, because he's very articulate, he's very intelligent, and he's very emotionally intelligent as well. And you've got intellectual intelligence and you've got emotional intelligence. Billy really has both of those. He's a very charismatic guy. He's got a huge following. I went to his Consciousness Awards in Miami last year. I'm going to go again this year. I was really impressed by the connection that people felt there with him. You could tell it was his friends, and there's a couple of thousand people there that just all like good friends and well connected, and just a good vibe, good energy, good people. And so I've been a supporter, and just in recognition that everybody has beliefs, and I'm not here to judge their beliefs, whether it's Billy's beliefs about ancient history or a religious beliefs or political beliefs or nationalism or anything like that, so just respect for different people's perspectives. And but he got into this thing recently with Wesley Huff, who's Christian, and of course, it was like, okay, this is the end of Billy's career. He's been exposed, and all this stuff. And it's like it's just one belief versus another belief is kind of what it felt like to me. And it kind of felt like a bunch of drama for essentially, nothing. But I really didn't dig into it too deeply. So I don't really know the full story about what happened. I want to ask Billy about it in a couple weeks, but I saw that you made maybe a video on it. And I know that you're so well up to speed and well versed on the topic that I figured I'd ask you about it and try to get your thoughts.
Okay, yeah, great question, because here's the thing. Me and Billy have different beliefs, if you want to call it beliefs. Okay, we have different interpretations of a lot of data. And I didn't really know. I had seen Billy show up on Joe Rogan's podcast before, and I heard some of the things. I'm like, whoa, that's a little out there for me, right? I mean, clearly, I have a different opinion. He engaged with this apologist named Wes Huff. By the way, was an insignificant Christian among the apologists online that I've engaged with that are popular, like in terms of who has most views and stuff. He had like 30,000, 40,000 subscribers at the time. And I say insignificant because like that's pretty significant to a lot of people, but like 200, 300, 400, 500,000 subscribers. That was the level of apologetics I was constantly doing back and forths with. And
define apologetic.
Someone who is like a lawyer, so to speak, but they're like a defender of the faith at all costs, in my view.
Got it.
I mean, clearly it was a respectable position that Christians think the term is a respectable one. For me, it's a pejorative. I mean, honestly, to me, it's like saying, I have my answer. I have my conclusion. Now let me work all the data to make sure that it matches my conclusion. That's what an apologist is to me.
Right. Okay.
And they wear it like a badge of honor because the text teaches you to defend the faith. No matter what, give them the reason why, you the hope in you that he rose from the dead. You do not know he rose from the dead. Why are you asserting he did? And now you're working overtime to make sure that we believe that he did. The data does not point in that direction, in my view, even though the text tries to tell you he did. Well, if that's the case, I've got some stories for you outside of the Bible. You should believe, right? Oh, you don't believe them? What's wrong? Why aren't you believing in those stories? Anyway, back to Billy, because I love Billy, actually. This actually created a relationship I thought was so ironic. Because you never think a world like mine, who's much more skeptical and into the skeptical world of like debunking stuff and all that, would ever like merge with Billy Carson and be like, hey, man, you know what? You're actually a good dude. I really like you, man. And I see your heart. And I met his wife through the video call where he would introduce his family. First of all, it's unfortunate the way that he was treated. I think that was absolutely horseshit. I do not think it was right. And on the background, if you go back and watch the debate, the original debate, where there's so many views that got all this attention to destroy Billy, I know Billy told me he was sick. He literally almost died. He was in a hospital. Go back and watch. He has a Band-Aid on his vein where you know he had IVs. Like you could tell there's injection site, okay? So anyone who thinks that's a bluff, the video, why would he have a Band-Aid going into this thing on his IV site? And he's telling me like, look, man, I wasn't right. Now, here's the thing. At the end of the day, Billy's humble enough to recognize he made mistakes. He was wrong about a few things, but he also wasn't completely wrong. That's where I stepped in. I was like, no, I'm sick of these bullies running around, smashing people over the head like they're the high and mighty and smarter than everyone else. Because one of the things that Billy said in that debate that I totally agree with him is that the Genesis account is 100% dependent on earlier mythology, particularly the Mesopotamian myths, Atrahasis. And it's not just the chaos into order, because that's a common motif that you find across many mythologies. It's literally the order and sequence of events in Genesis 1. From the first thing he makes is light. He's separating like light from darkness. None of the constellations are created yet. So in the Atrahasis epic, the god makes lights, but there is no sun yet. There's no, where did light come from? Okay, that's in Genesis 1, and many modern arguments over like science against the Bible, they go, well, hold on, how can you have light? There's no sun to produce the light. Where'd the light come from? And there's always these debates. That's in the Atrahasis epic for those who are curious to go further. You really need to. So he tried to gotcha, and it was so pedantic and so bully-like to me, and not compassionate as a Christian, I would say, should be. And when Billy's like, no, I think there's something to it, and he's like, well, okay, I can grant that's something, but that's not, like, he tried to dismiss everything like it was a gotcha, and I wouldn't have had anything to say if all they did was have a launch debate. It was typical. It became a propaganda machine against Billy. It became, this guy showed up and asked, hey man, I wasn't at my best. Can you remove the video? Let's launch that video and show people that he showed up at his friend's house asking his friend, man, I wasn't at my best. Let me at my best. We can go back at it round 2 or something. Like, it was we got you, and now the unforgivable sin, and we're just going to make you look bad. And that's not Christ-like behavior if you're going to act like Jesus, my friends. If you think, that's how you should be, is following someone who's compassionate, who turns the other cheek, who takes his coat off when someone's cold, who feeds the hungry. You have absolutely proven to me you are nothing like that. You are nothing even close like that. I don't give a shit what you have to say. And Billy's more like Christ than they ever will be. And so when I met Billy on the phone, I was like, man, and then he told me he'd been called the N-word more in his life by Christians, emailing him, messaging, commenting. He had more of them call him the N-word than he's ever in his whole life in 1 month. These are all Christians. And I thought, if there's one thing I will fight for, no matter what, it's that. I will fight. And so I was in communication where hopefully eventually we can actually talk, and I can go down and interview with him. Paul Wallace, he's got a big YouTube channel, The Fifth Kind. My brother, I love that guy. We don't have the same details agreed upon. Great people. So that was the nutshell. And then I found out, again, we can get into the details of that debate. But Wes Huff, I reached out in light of all this drama and went, hey, I'd like to talk to you. Oh, you got to schedule in. I've got like a year out. He gave me 0 time. I don't think he wanted it. And then Neil came out and was like, bro, you won't debate me. Neil came out furious. I loved it too, because he's like, he will not debate me. And we found him making so many mistakes. And we're like, okay, so yeah, Billy made mistakes. Okay, you did too. Where's the whole canceling him now? You know what I'm saying? Sorry, I'm getting emotional about that because I actually care about Billy, and I think that's just...
He's a good dude.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, cool. No, I appreciate it. Yeah, appreciate your perspective. Appreciate you sharing. Was just kind of curious your thoughts on that one. So, yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, good. Let's. I got a couple more questions for you. I think one of the things that we mentioned just prior to going on to the break was about Satan and trying to understand, for people out there who think they know who Satan is and what he kind of stands for, and everybody kind of has this image. I think mostly Christians have an image of Satan and what he is. But if you go back to like the origins of Satan, who is it? Is it even a person? Is it an entity? Is it an idea? What is Satan?
He looks to be, in the oldest sources, one of God's henchmen. On God's side, on his team, he was one of the council members of God's court. And
Yahweh.
Yeah, Yahweh. Yahweh.
Or Yahweh, right, sure.
He was one of the guys who searched the earth for the faithful and to test them because God wanted him to. Eventually, he fills in the gaps of all the ugly stuff that God once was given, all that. Let me give you an example, okay?
Why did God want him to test the believers?
Well, clearly this is a myth, okay? Yeah. So how we answer this is going to depend on how we even begin to describe this. It's a story written by someone who's trying to explain why the problem of evil even exists. Why am I suffering? Why do good people go through bad things? And that bad dude in that mansion over there, he never has a problem in his life, and he does all this evil in his life. It's the problem of evil. Why do good people suffer and bad people get rewarded? And how does that work? And so in that light, the question then becomes, well, why did my kids die? So if you know the story of Job, which Satan plays a huge role in, Job has everything. He's got it made in the shade. And then out of nowhere, things start going wrong. But they tell you the story. They give you the divine scene, the scene that no one else really sees, no human really sees, but the author lets you, the reader, see what's going on in the court. And God's on his throne, and he's sitting high and mighty. Satan comes in. Where are you coming from? My servant. He's one of his servants. To and fro from the earth, trampling in and out, up and down on it. I'm wandering, looking and seeking to try and find people. You get his job description in just a moment because he goes, yeah, you find anything? Yeah, I found your servant Job. And he goes, yeah, he worships me. He's very obedient, good man. And then Satan's like, yeah, but if we take away some of these good things that he has, Lord, then he will forsake you. Okay, go take away his things, but don't touch him. Okay. Notice God's the one doing it. It's all God. Then he goes and takes it away. And Job still blesses God.
So with permission from God essentially just says, check, go ahead and take everything from Job.
Go take everything from Job, but don't touch him. Round 2 comes.
So like murder his kid? Like
that's round 2, okay. I think. But it might have been round 1, either way. I know he kills his 10 kids.
Yeah. So God is murdering people. Secondhand, but
God has much more fatality rate than Satan ever has.
Wow.
God floods the whole world. God kills 70,000 people with the swing of a sword by the angel of the Lord. God, you name it. All evil comes from God. And if you read in Isaiah, he says, I create light, I create darkness. The prophet Isaiah wrote, which we don't know if the prophet Isaiah really wrote it. I'm so skeptical, bro. It's not even funny. But it says, I create light, I create darkness. I create good, I create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. Yeah, I form the light, create darkness, I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. And later, to get God, see, this sensitivity develops, Matt, where later on, authors are like, I don't want God to be the one that directly does these things. So they have this guy named Satan or an angel of the Lord take the job. The dirty work is not God's anymore. It's this other asshole. And because his job description sucks so damn bad, he eventually gets identified as an opponent once different views of philosophy come in, like dualism. So now you can actually say, well, it's good fighting against evil all the time. Really, the bad was God who did all of it. The good and the bad came from God, like we saw in Isaiah. But in other texts later, dualistic ideas come in where it's good versus evil, the yin and the yang kind of concept, always at struggle and at battle, but the light will always win against the darkness. And so Satan, Azazel, there's various names, Beelzebub, different names that we get described for the evil entity that is fighting against God, even tempting Jesus. If you are the Son of Man, Son of God, I meant, why don't you turn these stones into bread? Or if you are the Son of God, and he's testing, he's doing what Job's scene did. The difference is by the time you get to the New Testament, Satan seems in some context to actually be an enemy of God, no longer his henchman. So there's like this battle going on rather than God is the one who's behind it all.
In the Old Testament, or does it take until the New Testament to where they become?
It looks like the transition between the old into the new, somewhere in that in-between period, Jews are picking up this kind of dualistic idea as well, where good and evil are fighting, and it makes its way into the New Testament. But nothing's univocal. That's the problem. And univocal simply means not every book that is in there aligns and has the same outlook or idea. Some scholars will argue one book Satan seems to be like a henchman still in the New Testament. And in another one, it looks like he is the opponent trying to fight against God, but he's going to lose the war. So this gets into the fallen angels myth that kind of plays into that. Like Satan was this high angel who was an angelic musician of God, right there with God. And you go back into these other books like Ezekiel 28. In Ezekiel 28, I think it's Ezekiel 14, where it talks about this figure who wants to rise above God. He says, I will make my throne above you or something, talking about God. Now, we have totally misinterpreted the original context of this. Christians think this is Satan who falls. But if you go to like critical historical scholarship, they'll say actually it's an ancient king. It's a man, a God man, like a pharaoh or like a emperor or something like that, who's saying, I am above. And eventually his tomb, the worms will eat him and he will die like a man. Like he's just like everyone else. God's on the mountain. And so it's a very complex story that goes from he's doing all the dirty work, then eventually just becomes the asshole against God. And then Christians say, like, he's the bad guy. And we're like, no, dude, your God's a genocidal, absolute warlord who is telling you to take war booty women who are virgins only and kill the ones who aren't, and to keep them for yourself. This is a God that even the early Christian Marcion, now they may not call him a Christian, but he was really about it. And he said, no. This God of the Old Testament cannot be the God of Jesus. Jesus is love in his interpretation. Jesus is all loving. His father is a different father. That is a maniacal, evil son of a bitch. He cannot be Jesus's father. And he quotes verses like a modern skeptic of Christianity will, saying genocide, slavery, death, flood, killing everybody, like the list goes on and on. He used those arguments that we would today against the Christians who tried to make the God of Jesus the Old Testament God, and against Jewish people who try to say, no, our God is the one true God. He's like, no, your God's evil. There's only one God, and it's the God of Christ. And there's these interesting passages in the New Testament where Jesus says something like this. He says, no one has seen the Father except for the Son, the one who has come from the Father. That's a weird verse to say.
That's weird. Yeah.
You know why it's weird? I can read Old Testament verses where they saw God. Men saw God many times in the Old Testament. Jesus said, no one has seen the Father except for the Son. Jesus, have you not read your Old Testament? Mm-hmm. So Marcion is saying, this is a different God. And this is a good God. That's an evil God. Dude, there's so much crazy stuff we could get into about the Jewish God being the God Set from Egypt, the horse ass-headed donkey God, and that they believed that this evil God Set from Egypt was Yahweh, the God of Israel. And that he was hiding, they had the Holy of Holies where they didn't want anyone to see. There was like this like myth or a conspiracy that was spreading that was saying, nah, Jews are really worshiping an ass-headed donkey. In fact, we should pull up this image of Jesus depicted crucified with a donkey's head, one of the earliest depictions of Jesus.
I've seen that.
You have seen it?
Mm-hmm.
I tell you, that's part of that long-standing propaganda about the evil God. And so it just depends on who's looking. But
yeah. So the God of Judaism, I always thought that the God of the Old Testament was also the God of the New Testament, that Yahweh is Jesus's father, that Yahweh is God. And that's one thing when I ask a lot of Christians, like, who is God? And Christians will say, well, it's Jesus. But then you double click and you're like, no, Jesus is the Son. Who's the Father? And they're like, God? And nobody like can put a name on, okay, but what's God's name? Right. Nobody knows. I always thought that, okay, I finally learned it one day when I was like 40 years old. Okay, this is Yahweh. We're talking about Yahweh here, or El
Yahweh. They're the same deity by the time the New Testament's they've merged. But
now you're saying that there's actually a group of people that are saying that, okay, this is an evil God because, I mean, genocide and murder and slavery, those things are evil, and that's all within the Old Testament. Like, no questions asked, no debate about that. That exists within there. That's what God was doing. So they're saying, well, that can't be God. It must be a different God. It must not be Yahweh. It must be what? Like, who is this other God character now that they're creating because they don't like their evil God?
Right.
Yeah.
So as far as Marcion, he believes this is a God that is above that demiurge God, the creator God.
But what about today? Like, what do people think today? I mean, or they don't even know what they think.
So modern Christianity.
Yeah.
So first of all, the way they answer they just throw in the Trinity, which is just an enigma we have no clue how to actually explain. And so they just create a bigger problem, in my opinion, to try and bring in a triad. Okay. So now they just go, oh yeah, well, the Son is God. And so why is the Son praying to God? Well, he's praying to himself, to his Father, really, because it's not him, but it is him. Like, where the hell do you go from here, Matt?
Right.
But the modern Christians, when they deal with all these Old Testament passages, they do what Wes Huff did with Billy. They try to play this game like, oh no, but they had better laws than the rest of them around. No, there's an interesting debate that I had on my channel I hosted. Kip Davis, expert Old Testament Dead Sea Scroll scholar, Assyriologist Joshua Bowen debated two Christians, Trent Horn and I can't remember the other guy's name right now off the top. While they were debating, they brought up the other ancient law codes. And from Hammurabi's code, there's this one law code that talks about you can own the slave or the indentured servitude or whatever. Maybe it is I'm not sure if it's indentured or what kind of slave they are, but after 3 years, you are to set them free in the Hammurabi code. In the Bible, you can own a foreign slave as long as they're not chattel. If they're chattel, you own them for life. They're your property permanently. And that is biblical and that is in the laws. And they try to hide that. They try to just dismiss it. And it's there. But
God is saying this. God is saying that slavery
there are laws
is okay.
that God is right behind saying yes. These people are claiming God is saying. Now, clearly, what God is actually saying.
Well, but it's in there.
Exactly.
It's in the Bible that God says this within the Bible that slavery is okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's absolutely okay.
It's not just okay. It's like the way that things should be.
100%.
Yeah.
And when you get to the Bible, you can own a foreigner for 6 years. But in the Hammurabi code, you can own them for 3 in this law code, right? And they're similar law codes. They are covering the same kinds of slavery. And Joshua Bowen brought it up and goes, so what do you think about this? It's actually better in Hammurabi. You get 3. Yeah, here we go. Your male and female slaves are to come to the nation from the nations around you. For them, you may buy slaves. You may also buy some temporary residents living among you and members of their clans born in your country. They will become your property. You can bequeath them. This is that. By the way, if you're an actual chattel slave and you marry someone,
Chattel?
you're permanently their property. You're a chattel slave. You are owned. You are the master's property, and you have a wife or children or whatever, and then you actually get released, let's say. The wife and the children are not your property. They're still the master's property, even if you produce them while you're under him. Like, the laws are pretty intense. But that 6-day rule, the Christians on that made an excuse during the debate. I did not see this one coming, but this is what an apologetic is. They have the answer, and they have to do everything they can to fix it. And they are the fixer-uppers. The professional BSers, in my opinion, is what an apologetic is. And what they did is they said, well, in the ancient world, you struggled to eat, you struggled to survive. So actually, they were fortunate enough to be enslaved for 6 years.
Sure.
And Joshua Bowen, I'm not making this up, man. Joshua Bowen to this day has such a great point. He goes, imagine, Derek, imagine if the Bible said after 3 years, you release your slave, and Hammurabi said 6. What would the Christians say? And he's like, I'll tell you what they would say. They would go, look, it's half the amount of time that they get to keep you as a slave. Notice the bullshit shenanigans happening here right in front of our eyes?
Right.
Like, that is what apologetics is. And I know because I was one. I was delusionally just working overtime to keep my addiction alive.
Your identity alive.
Yep.
Yeah. And addiction. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, fascinating.
I wanted to bring up Dionysus one more time before.
Yeah, please. Yeah, go ahead.
In Jesus. Okay, because we went to Yahweh. I just mentioned Nisa Mamzalog. I know that there's Hellenistic authors that correlate the Jews. We got the Maccabees I talked about. We need to deal with Jesus just 1 second, and then whatever question you have. I just really, really need to nail this down. In the Gospel of John, scholars like Dennis R. MacDonald, he wrote a book called The Dionysian Gospel. In that book, he shows how the Gospel of John, which is the last gospel that we have in our New Testament, the 4th one, that gospel seems to be inspired from older Greek play called Euripides Bacchae. That's a story, it's a play about Dionysus. And there's been other scholars who've actually seen Mark W.G. Stibe, S-T-I-B-B-E. He wrote on this as well, but he doesn't try to be as strong about the conclusions. Dennis is like, no, it seems to be modeling it. In this book, Gospel of John, Jesus turns water into wine. We've all heard about this. Well, guess who's been doing that for centuries? Dionysus. He's been transforming water into wine by making springs turn into wine, rivers, fountains. He's also made empty cauldrons, kind of like we have these vases over here, but giant ones. And in the Dionysus thing, Aristotle writes about this in the 3rd century BCE, where overnight the priest would leave it in the Dionysian temple, the god would appear, and then the next morning they were full of wine. So why is this parlor trick taking place by Jesus in John chapter 2? If it's not trying to compete and say Jesus is better. And you get centuries later, even the next couple centuries, there's literally, I would say decades after the Gospel of John, there's a myth about a Tyrian myth in Tyre, how Dionysus brought wine to the world. And the language about blood and wine has so much correlation in Greek to the Greek that's used in the Gospel of John, where Jesus says, drink my blood, eat my flesh. The new covenant is in my blood. And this drink, this wine is that. That has so much overlap with the John Gospel that scholars, even Tim Whitmarsh, who's like a leading classicist, sees, he wrote a commentary on Achilles Tatius, which is the text, and he sees this and goes, man, these myths are talking to each other. They're responding and reacting to each other. And I did this deep dive research. Jesus calls himself the true vine. Dude, Dionysus is the vine. He is the grape. That grape is the blood. And if you know about any worship of the Dionysus stuff, they had a thing called sparagmos and omophagia, where they tore the god in an act of eating his flesh and drinking the blood. Why did they do it? They were reenacting the death of the god. Yep. By the way, that's Pentheus. In the middle, that's in Euripides Bacchae. Those are Maenads. So they're friends, women that were part of Dionysus's cult, and they capture him. He was spying on them. They capture him and they rip him into pieces. One of them is his mother. She's in a complete frenzy. She kills her son thinking that he was some wild animal. Then she carries his head on a pike back into the city, according to Euripides Bacchae, and it dawns on her that it's her son's head. She comes out of the delusion. Oh my God, this is my son. Dionysus caused them to go into that frenzied state. Well, when you read in the New Testament, in Acts chapter 2, Jesus ascends to heaven, and then there's a moment in the inner room where tongues of fire, the Holy Spirit comes down. And it says that they started speaking in other tongues. They spoke in tongues. What happens next is the bystanders around are going, are they drunk? The accusation of them being drunk because they're speaking in an unknown language. Guess what? Euripides Bacchae. The Maenads, the women they're in a frenzy, they literally are speaking in gibberish. They don't know what they're saying, and they're getting accused of being drunk. And so when you start looking at all the correlations and similarities, even there's a prison break scene. Dionysus is imprisoned by Pentheus. An earthquake happens, shakes the doors open. He walks out. In the book of Acts, the same thing with Peter and Paul. They get imprisoned. They walk out due to an earthquake that happens. Like, what the hell, bro? I mean, after a while, you kind of go, all right, he's a true vine. They're eating him. And the reason they do it is they're ingesting the God into them, becoming one in union with the deity. That's exactly what the Maenads did with Dionysus. That's exactly what Christians do with Jesus, Catholics today. This is my body, this is my blood, and it somehow magically is actually Jesus.
Yep. I did that for 40 years, man. I was told that I was eating the actual body and drinking the actual blood of Christ. I didn't drink the wine, the red wine, but yeah, we were supposedly actually eating the real flesh of Jesus, not like in a symbolic way. Catholics actually believe that they're actually eating Jesus every time that they do it. It's that's the belief, man.
There's so much more about this though that I can't get into.
Kinda, as Catholics, we kind of didn't really talk about that part of it. You kind of skip that. Like if anything's too crazy, too fringe, nobody really ever like brought that to your attention. No priest would ever actually, they say the body of Christ, and they hold it up and that's it, and then it's like, okay, you come up and you say amen, which signifies that you believe that this is the actual body of Christ. But nobody tells you that that's what you're doing, and the fact that you actually think that you're supposedly eating, not in a symbolic way, but you're actually eating Jesus, somebody that lived over 2,000 years ago, probably lived over 2,000 years ago.
Probably. Yeah, we don't know. Yeah, and This is a funny part you bring up. I love that you're taking your time just saying that. People are like, what do you mean? Dude, you're eating a human being. Think about what you're doing. I had a Christian yell at me trying to tell me I was wrong about one of these Dionysus sources that was written about how he came and the wine changed for 7 days. And in the story, it says, when the god comes, the wine comes for 7 days. And when you take the water outside of the temple, it starts to taste like water again. Because it was water originally, turned into wine. Now it tastes like water again. He goes, well, it didn't turn into water. It just tasted like water, right? So he didn't want to like allow that the water was actually, it was changing back into water. There was a real change according to the myth. And then he turned around in the same voice and went and go, listen, we Christians believe that cracker and that wine really becomes the blood and really becomes the flesh. And he goes, but thank God it doesn't taste like it, even though it really is him. And I said, you're lecturing me, dude? You believe you're eating a dude. And you're telling me, I mean, it's insanity to me,
and
honestly.
Billy Carson has wild beliefs, right?
Yeah, this is worse.
This is extreme. This is out there, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Billy, I love you, man. I'm sorry if I've ever, you know what I'm saying, bro? Like,
no, it's wild, man. I mean, like, yeah, he's tame. I mean, he's tame compared to this. It's a cult, you know?
Yeah.
It's a cult. Yeah, cool, man. Cool. So yeah, it's interesting stuff. So Satan. So when Ammond goes on and says "Hail Satan," you know, on every podcast that he starts, is he and Satan now? You know, when we think about that as Christians or as people kind of think about that "Hail Satan" kind of comment. I mean, people freak out about that, and they take it like, oh my God, he's a Satan worshiper, he's a devil worshiper, he's evil, he cuts up, you know, animals probably and drains them of their blood and drinks their blood. Like that's where people go when they hear that. In reality, my understanding is Satan means opposition to the church.
Oftentimes, again, I'm glad you're bringing in a interpretation, right?
Yeah.
That's just one is like, I'm going to rebel against this religion and therefore hell the other guy that you guys think's the enemy. Well, I'm going to make him the hero and I'm going to make your guy the enemy.
Right.
So he's reversing it in a way. I have heard Ammon try. There's some interesting overlap between other myths and Satan and how Satan gets depicted. For example, Prometheus. If you know anything about Prometheus, he thinks also, by the way, Dionysus plays some role in Satan because the frenzy and all this kind of stuff. He thinks there's some correlation between how Christians view Satan and God. And so Jesus and Dionysus, the counterpart of Jesus is Dionysus. I've heard that from Ammon in past. But Prometheus, this is a Titan who was on the side of the gods when the Titanomachy happened, the war in heaven. And he sided with Zeus and them, which meant Zeus saw him and said, hey, I'll keep you around. But then when mankind was made by the gods, he helped side with them over against the gods and thought it was wrong and wanted to bring them fire so they could survive in very cold and difficult times in the myth. So he brings them fire against the will of the gods. This is ancient Enki and Ea in Mesopotamia, the trickster god. He's a trickster. That's why Christians later equated the serpent in the garden with Satan, because he tricks according to the Christian interpretation. In truth, the original Genesis, this is going to sound a little bit funny, the serpent wasn't the bad guy. The serpent was actually telling the truth. This is the funny part. God lied. You go, no, you just don't love God, bro. No. I'm telling you, God is the trickster the same way that Enki and Ea tricks Adapa, the older myth. What happened? Man, we're jumping, man. We're jumping. Prometheus gets nailed to a rock, crucified to a rock for punishment for the fire. Going back to Genesis, the serpent tells him, if you eat, God knows, your eyes will be opened. You will know good and evil, and you'll become like the gods. God said, in the day you eat, you will surely die. He ate. She ate. Their eyes were opened, it says. The text says their eyes were opened, knowing good and evil. God comes, kicks them out. They don't die. Who was right? Who was wrong? It's right in front of your face. And when you go to the older myth of Adapa, Adapa is a sage. He worships the god Enki Ea, ancient Mesopotamian myth. The wind is blowing while he's trying to fish for a fish to give to the god in the temple. He gets pissed. He uses his magical powers. He breaks the wing of the south wind. Anu, the high god, the chief god in heaven, says, hey, who did this? Get him. Bring him to me. So he gets summoned. But before he goes, Enki, Ea, says, listen, Adapa, he's going to offer you food and drink. It's death poison. Don't eat it. Don't drink it. If you do, you're going to die. He goes up. Hey, why'd you break the wing? Would you like some food and drink? No, I'm good on the food and drink. I'll take the anointing, the Christing. I'll take the anointment, the oil that you put on my head, but I won't take the food and drink. And then he goes, why? He goes, I don't want to die. He goes, this was the food and drink of immortality. You just passed up your opportunity to live forever. And he laughs. He goes, what? He knew right away, Anu says in the myth, what has Enki done to trick you? So, is Yahweh in the garden really this benevolent deity? Is he a trickster god? Well, the way that most people would interpret this is say, he's kind of like a parent who says, if you eat that damn cookie, it's got poison in it. Don't you go in the cookie jar. And the thing is like, he doesn't want you to do it. He wants you to stay innocent. Once you go there, and this is probably why people interpret it as a sex act, that eating the fruit was a sex thing, because when you go to the older myth again, another one from Gilgamesh, if you go there, there's this guy named Enkidu. Enkidu becomes the counterpart to Gilgamesh. They became lovers, just like David and Jonathan. That's a whole nother story in the Bible, where King David was in love with a man. So Christians, hate to burst your bubble. Anyway, look, so Gilgamesh, he's a tyrant. He's a bad king. He's not doing good. Enkidu gets created. He's a wild man in the wilderness who lives with the animals, but he's as mighty as Gilgamesh. Well, Shamhat, the prostitute, comes, and he finally gets drawn to her. She spreads her legs and shows her jewels, and he lies with her, and the text gets vivid. He then becomes knowing of civilization. He then understands what it means to be a man and not a wild beast in the wilderness. He tries to go back. The animals wouldn't have it. They want nothing to do with him. He's been defiled and become human now. It's a myth, and it's powerful because in the Garden of Eden, in the Genesis account, Adam is there and he names the animals and he's looking for helpmeet. He doesn't have a partner. God puts him to sleep and takes from his rib and creates Eve. There's another myth, Ninhursag, and I can't remember the name of the other character, where out of the body, the god gets sick and one of the women takes a piece of the body part from the rib and creates a particular mother of all living from the rib in the ancient Mesopotamia myth. Look, I'm off the top of my head, so forgive me for not being precise. Fact check everything I said. If you're a viewer, I promise you, it will blow your mind if you take the story in Genesis literal, but you ignored all the others. And these stories are proven to be older. Like, we have the actual text. You have what? Papyri from 300 BCE at best. We have 3000 BCE on clay. Thousands of years these stories have been alive on clay before your books were ever written. And I say you should bow down to the ancient myths and show more homage and respect to the stories that they come from. That's my personal opinion. I have a lot of respect for these stories. But you could see Satan being developed, the trickster. And by the way, lying back then was actually good. It's the reverse of us today. Plato has affected us. So if you were clever enough to tell a deceiving lie and trick your opponent, they thought you were brilliant and you were great. I'm not kidding. The Greeks really capitalized on this. The whole Trojan horse thing, that was a deceiving move. Brilliant. And it won them the war. And the Greeks loved liars in a sense. They thought if you could trick them, even better. You get these stories all throughout the Bible too. Jacob with his father-in-law Laban. Dude, I could go on and on and on and on and on and on about this. I just want to say the Bible is 100% influenced and in communication with the broader mythic world.
Yeah, makes sense. Totally. Yeah, I've thought for a little while now, last couple of years, that the garden story with Adam and Eve and the eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, that was a way that they could explain judgment, essentially. And that they gained knowledge of good and evil, and prior to that, they didn't have it. They didn't have right, wrong, good, bad. They just had acceptance for the way that things were, and not labeling and judging things as right or wrong or good and bad. But after eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, everything became, oh, that's wrong. Oh, that's right. Oh, that's good. Oh, that's bad. And judgment develops. Judgment is synonymous with, it happens at the same time that we label things good, bad, right, and wrong. And so for me, that story and getting eternal life by not having that is, for me, a part of the false self is judgment, and a part of your true self is acceptance, and that you don't that you can gain eternal life and understand your true authentic self if you live by some things live by some practices that are that lessen the ego, that lessen your movie character, your false self, the things that you identify with, the things that you judge, the things that you're conditioned by, your self labels, your identification with things like race, with things like religion, with things like politics, with things like all of those sorts of things. So for me, that story gets back to eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil is the moment at which humans developed original sin. And to sin was to miss the mark in ancient Greeks. To sin was it wasn't like I'm judging you as less morally, you're morally inferior to me. Sinning was just missing the point. It was missing the mark. And so that original sin was just not understanding. It's just missing the mark of what is of judgment, essentially. And so I feel like that was I feel like that's a message that's hidden within that story that most people are just, that it just goes directly over people's heads. But I think it deals directly with judgment of good, bad, right, and wrong, and that things just are the way that they are until we judge them, and that eternal life and finding your true authentic self is something that can happen if you refuse to judge. And I think that's something that all of the ancient mystics talked about, and all of the spiritually enlightened people cover and talk about as something to practice avoidance of judgment and avoidance of labeling and self-labeling too. Self-labeling is I am Christian. Self-labeling is I am atheist. Self-labeling, it's all of those, or labeling other people as a specific race or as whatever it is that they're identified with. So that's kind of been, as I've kind of, gone down this attempt to pull myself out of the matrix and understand what's real. I often visualize, well, what would be left if all the power grids around the earth all went down simultaneously? Then I think we find out what's real really quickly. And we immediately find out that race and religion and nationality and political party and none of that's real anymore. All of that is dead. It's completely dead. It's contained within the human mind, the collective human mind, and it's contained on electrically on the internet now today. And we wake up every day and we just perpetuate these stories and we just keep them going. And I feel like, with no power, we're outside with nature. We find out what's really real. Yeah, for sure.
I love that you bring that up. So there's so many ways to interpret things. These stories get reinterpreted for a reason. They're so vague and general often, and they're deeply ingrained in our experience as humans that we find ways to make them make sense to us in our modern context. But some of them just seem to ring true and even never end in their kind of parable nature, their repetitive wisdom they can teach us. And Gilgamesh is one of them. I brought him up earlier. Enkidu, he falls in love with. And Enkidu and him go on this adventure against this cedar god named Humbaba, who has a face that looks like the insides of a human. It's like intestines looking face, monster, terrified. And they were like really afraid going in there to fight. They fight it. They cross the gods. They do some things they shouldn't have done. Enkidu dies. Says that a maggot or a worm came out of his nose and it made Gilgamesh realize, I'm not going to live forever. There is Humbaba on the right. There's Enkidu on the left. And Humbaba is a monstrous, ferocious beast. Enkidu, look, I love the way that they do the statues with the beards. They have like braids and stuff. So Gilgamesh, after seeing his most beloved friend, best friend Enkidu die, he ends up going on this adventure to try and find a way to live forever. He goes all over the sands to the edge of the earth, flat earth cosmology, even though they had a dome sky. And there he is holding the lion. By the way, this is something important. We have no surviving stories of Gilgamesh killing or conquering, subduing, and destroying a lion. No written text. But we have Heracles in one of his 12 labors barehandedly kills a lion. We have David in the Bible kills a lion barehanded. We have Samson kills a lion barehanded. Strongmen, right? And many scholars think, no, there's even a guy named Melkart from Phoenicia. This is the OG of the lion tamers, Gilgamesh. Now, maybe there was an older one somewhere that Gilgamesh is inspired from, but they think Gilgamesh was a real historical ancient king. So this epic I'm telling you about is fictional. It's mythic, and it's about the city of Uruk. He's a king. The gods and kings lived, and they were together. So he ventures the world, gets to the edge of the earth, and decides, I'm going through the tunnel of the sun. No man has ever crossed the tunnel of the sun. Gilgamesh is not no man, right? He's you. He's me. He's the greatness in us, right? Read him that way. That's the importance, I think, of these epics. He goes through the dark tunnel of the sun, and the sun's chasing him. In 12 hours, he runs. He makes it to the other side. Now there's this sea of death, the water of death. You can't touch it. I'm going to skip some of the details for the sake of brevity. He gets across all the way to the other side, and he meets this man that he had heard about named Utnapishtim. They may correct how to pronounce this. Some philologists are saying we've been mispronouncing this for a long time, and this is the pronunciation they've been saying. We may update that eventually. But right now, Utnapishtim, he's a survivor of the flood. And he comes all the way out there. Him and his wife are in this far, far away land. And what are you doing here? He says. And he's like, I need immortality. I need to live forever. He's laughing like, dude, I can't give you that. And poor Gilgamesh is just heartbroken and knows he's going to die one day. And he tells him the story of the flood with all the gods, plural, and how he was gifted immortality for surviving the flood. And at the last moment, when Enlil, which is the chief god, comes and smells a sacrifice after he destroys all mankind, he regrets it. The Bible says that when Noah had made a sacrifice after the flood, and he smelt the aroma, the sweet barbecue of the flesh of the animal, which what real God would give a crap about that? He goes, I will never again flood the earth. He changes his mind, his heart from the food. Now, I don't know about you, bro. When I'm hungry and the wife makes an amazing meal, I'm like, I love you forever. Okay? Well, that's human. Okay? And it's depicted in these gods. Gilgamesh, heartbroken, he has to be sent away. But before he does, the wife, the wise woman of the story goes, honey, give him something. He's come all this way. So he goes, okay, you're right. He gives him this plant. And he says, this plant will rejuvenate your youth. Like this will keep you alive. You'll keep rejuvenating your youth. So he goes, all right. And he starts to head back. He thinks to himself, I'll test this on one of the old people in Uruk when I get home. He ends up getting the plant. That's another thing, is to swim down to get it. But just skipping that, he's tired. He needs to take a nap. So he rests. And while he goes to sleep, a snake, I'm not making this up, this is older than the Bible, a serpent comes up and steals the plant that was going to give him a form of immortality to live on. And he wakes up. There you go. The plant is taken. Gilgamesh wakes up, back at square one. How do I live forever? This is the conundrum. These ancient stories, I think, do depict what you're talking about internally, that deep spiritual inner man type. How do I live forever? I can't live forever, but I want to live forever. How do I? Gilgamesh gets back to Uruk with wisdom this time. Not the tyrant he was. He used to sleep with the women before they married their husbands. He was a bad king. He was a cruel man, but he's every one of us. He's every one of us. And if you read it that way, you can empathize and go, We have good and we have bad. And at the end of the story, he looks at Uruk. The same way the story begins is how it ends. Uruk. And he describes its dimensions and its length and its might and its great. And he's like, this is my fame. This is my glory. And the way that the beginning of the story started, it ended. And Assyriologist Joshua Bowen and others say, that is the eternality of it. It starts the way it ends, and it starts the way it ends, and it starts the way it ends, and it never ends. And as long as you echo Gilgamesh's story, Gilgamesh is alive. I say we can live the same way, immortality through this. And so we should have stories. We should be doing something to where that's how we can live on. You know what I mean? Giving profound wisdom and helping the world in that way, that I think is a good form of immortality to have. Even if there isn't, let's say, something after. Who knows? There might be. I hope the party doesn't stop.
Yeah.
Sorry for the ramble there.
No, good stuff, man. I mean, you are a wealth of knowledge, brother.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's been.
You are too.
Awesome to talk to you, for sure. I learned a lot. I mean, I don't know how you keep all the facts and data straight.
I smoke DMT. Okay.
Okay.
Just saying.
that helps.
Kidding.
Well, what's coming up next for you? What's new? What's going to be new in life or on your channel or whatever?
So I'm actually trying to take these long documentaries that I'm always making. Shorten them, because I think everything I've talked to you today in just 20-minute videos would be good. Sweet spot. I also want to do some conferences. I'd like to put some stuff together where people can come and you can have academics come and do lectures, maybe a cruise. I want to start doing tours in Greece. And when the war has settled down and there's peace in the Middle East, I want to go visit the holy sites that are there in the Dead Sea, Galilee, and the region of Israel. Right now, it's just too much turmoil, too much conflict, and politically, it's so tense. I have no interest in touching that with a 1,000,000-foot pole.
Yeah.
But as far as my channel goes, man, I'm wanting to keep educating people because I think that this is a huge key to freedom. And it's not, let's not believe in anything or let's just be so skeptical we have nothing. No. I think there's so much more value in this. And that's what I'm trying to aim for. Like at one point, I am, by definition, people would call me, you're an atheist. But I see the behaviors and patterns of many atheists. And I go, well, that's not me. Just because I don't think Yahweh actually exists, right? Could there be something out there? Yes. So in a way, I'm kind of agnostic. I really don't know. And so I'm trying to create a space where believer, non-believer, identifying whatever, if they can break outside of the dogma enough to enter into this arena and realize the value and appreciation of these ancient wisdom tells, these stories and myths, and throw out the bad, genocide, slavery, get rid of that shit. Call it for what it is, but maybe find something good. That doesn't mean ignore the bad. That means recognize we did wrong. Let's move forward. Let's not repeat it. You know what I mean? That's kind of my goal, my aim with my channel, man.
Cool.
So I'm sure there's going to be other things coming, but right now, that's where I'm at.
Awesome. Really cool. Love it, man. Yeah, I love it. You're doing good work, educating a lot of people. So keep it up. Your channel is we'll put a link up there, Ryan, so people can jump on and subscribe and all that stuff. So yeah, man, I appreciate it. Appreciate your time. Appreciate your knowledge. Appreciate you coming on, brother.
Yeah, anytime, bro.
Yeah.
Anytime.
For sure. And you wanted to talk vases at some point. So
absolutely. If I could just say to your audience right now, like that's really, really interesting. The vases that you have, I'm looking at the one with the pinky hole that I can't even fit my pinky in.
Yeah.
Look, come on. You're not asking for a Billy Carson interpretation necessarily. You're even saying, you'd like to hear it, but like you're even saying, no, why did we have better building projects, better everything in the older dynasties, and it degraded over time? I am asking the same question. I'm curious. Now, I'd like to know what the experts say because I like to bounce off of them and then think, but we shouldn't be met with criticism or with like a resistance in every time something comes up. That's why I do enjoy listening to Graham Hancock. I do love, he's kind and everything, but he also is thinking outside that box. Like, what if the Native Americans have been here for 40,000 years? What if they didn't cross the Bering, as they say,
what if
11?
they've been here for 6 million years or some shit? Like, who fucking knows? We don't know.
That would blow my mind.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But, those things, I'm not saying they're 6 million years old. I'm not saying they're 100,000 years old. They're probably 4,600 years old, just like they're supposed to be. But how are they made? we don't know how they were made today. The glyph that all the experts point to is from 1300 BC. It's 2,000 years after these artifacts were made, and they're depicted using alabaster, and they're depicted, carving a very soft stone. It's as soft as marble. Marble's very, very soft stone. It's like a breccia, like a limestone, like a calcite. It's very easy very easy to cut and carve. So
that's your area. I'm going to have to pick your brain on.
Yeah. I'd be happy to talk about it for sure. And my only question is, how were they made? I mean, I don't think there's anything controversial about asking that question. I mean, people are going to attack just because they're going to jump out and say, I disagree with Matt or with them, or bucket us into a group and try to, tell us that we're crazy or that we're invoking aliens. None of that's true. None of that's true at all. I don't think aliens made these things. Like that's, why would we jump to that?
No, and
we're just trying to, ask some questions and get some questions answered.
Questions.
And it's like, how are they made at the end of the day? And if it's a lathe, look, the explanation currently is hammer and chisel, and that they were just made with hammer and chisel, but you don't get that level of roundness with the hammer and chisel. You can't, because you can't see it. You can't eyeball that level of roundness. And so there's clearly a lathe in existence at least 2,000 years prior to when the first depiction of a lathe is said to exist in 1300 BC. That's the first time academics will say that a lathe was in use in ancient Egypt. And I'm looking at these things and saying that's just not true. I mean, there was clearly lathes before that. So.
It almost makes me feel a little like miracle if you're trying to assume a rock and a stick for that one. I'm like I don't even know how you would do it for the others.
It's impossible.
Clearly, it just seems so. There are mysteries, right? There are mysteries. If we think we have it all figured out, that's not a good place to be, I think, is if you have everything known, that's not a great place to be. And if every time something's brought up, you're just so resistant to something that might actually contradict the narrative, I'm not a fan of that either, because in my field, while I might be very cautious and skeptical, I am pushing the boundaries and going a little bit beyond many of the scholars that I have interviewed and have on my channel.
Right.
So I get what you're doing, and I respect it. Yeah. I respect the grind. This is a common sense observation, and it just doesn't look like that would do it, It
doesn't. Yeah. Well, good, man. It's a great conversation today. I look forward to our next conversation for sure.
Same.
And I think, like you mentioned, like having you and Neil come on and have the three of us kind of talk at some point in the future would be a lot of fun too. So we ought to get that. We ought to
Absolutely.
do that. Yeah.
It'll take it to a whole nother level.
No doubt.
Know what I'm saying?
No doubt.